Monday, May 20th. I'm glad everyone could make time to join us. We will get right into things. You're going to see that the work session agenda is short in list but long in conversation. We are going to go ahead and have a formal presentation by our finance director and our interim city manager on our budget and where we are, which of course this is the first step. We're not voting tonight. This is not the public hearing. This is not any of those things. This is getting the first blush of it out here for us. So with that, let's get started. Ms. Getz, if you would start us off with a roll call.
Mayor Gaylor.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Matthews.
Present.
Councilman Boyette.
Present.
Councilwoman Taylor.
Present.
Councilwoman Weeks.
Present.
Councilman White.
Present.
All right, we'll move towards an adoption of the agenda. There is something that came in Wednesday evening that is something that the city is not really a party to. It doesn't require a whole lot of conversation or debate. I would like to add a document that was then sent out to council, I believe either earlier today. It was an approval of an easement, or excuse me, approval of an agreement to maintain a drainage easement. And Ms. Getz, I want you to hear me on this one because it's not my note. I would like to add that as item O under items requiring individual action, just to make sure that there's opportunity for council to be heard on that one. Again, there's not a whole lot of conversation there, but I would like to go ahead and get that one across if we can. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended or not.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Ms. Weeks. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to adopt the agenda as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. All right. So we'll have that as item O under items requiring. We'll get to that later this evening during the 7 o'clock session. There is no old business, as you can see on the agenda, so we'll move directly into new business. And we have a budget presentation. Mr. Livingston, you want to start? So kind of get us brief?
I'm up first, and thank you. I'm just going to hit over some of the high points of the budget before the finance director comes up. In general, the budget was a $100 million submitted budget from the departments. We reduced that amount to roughly $85 million, cutting about $15 million out of the proposed budget. Most of that was in capital items. A lot of that budget amount is non-discretionary monies. 50% of our budget comes from salaries and benefits. So many of the cuts did involve deferring capital expenses. But most of the top capital items and equipment were funded as the departments gave us our top priorities, and we funded those. But we weren't able to fund a fire apparatus, and so fire engines are still a concern going forward. I just wanted to make that clear. The general fund increased by about $6.3 million from what was adopted last year from what was being proposed. Most of that is due to salary increases for police and fire. Next slide, please. I don't have can y'all move the slide for me? Okay, thank you. So the highlights, it's like say, it is definitely a public safety driven budget. Some of the needs for a recommended tax increase revolve around those. For example, to cover the ARPA replacement funds, that's going to take about $1.5 million. Last year we used fund balance to cover that. We can't continue to use fund balance to cover those kind of issues. We either have to do that or do some kind of cuts elsewhere. The PD salary increases in March, that amounted to an additional $1.1 million. And I've equated that again to 5 cents on the property tax, which is the property tax 1 penny is equal to about $233,000. Fire department is also recommended, and the city council agreed at their retreat in February that they would want us to include fire department salaries. That's 1.1 million at 5 cents. As I mentioned, the ARPA replacement revenue to supplant that, which has gone away. We use that to finance or spend on salaries, that's a 1.5 million need there. That's about 6.5 cents. And we're proposing a 2.5% COLA. The CPI is 3.5%. The county is, when I understand, they're doing 2%, and that's an estimated cost of $750,000 or 3.2 cents. So all those, if you add those up, it's about 19 cents on the tax rate, but we're recommending use of fund balance, $1,061,555, to lessen that impact to a 15-cent property tax increase. And you know, I know that's a lot of money. I've never had to do that in my career before, but I've also looked at it, and I know the city council needs to, and one of their biggest priorities, reducing crime. Over the last several years, there's been a marked increase in crime, and especially lately. We can't get a handle on the crime if we don't have the officers in the department to be able to fight the crime, and that's one of the challenges we've had. We cannot recruit and retain officers. We have over 30 vacancies right now. The increase that was done in March is helping, so we feel like it's going to take a little time because you have to get them into BLET school, but I definitely feel like that's something that was needed. We just have to be able to pay for it now. And next slide, please. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council.
Good evening.
And Ms. Gwen, if you would, before you really get into the presentation, and I know one of the last slides up here is a discussion of the procedure and the process. Would you very briefly, here's where we are tonight, here's what's got to happen between now and whatever date that we actually approve a budget, so everyone understands exactly where we are tonight.
Okay, so, and we can jump ahead to that.
But I want to say it twice, that's why, because
Sure.
I know it's the
Understand.
conclusion as well.
So, as you mentioned, Mayor, you know, this brief presentation that we're going to have on this budget, the recommended budget, is just to give the council and the public a bird's eye view, a 50,000-foot view of where we are. So one thing that I will be asking the council later on this evening is you need to decide how many and what work sessions you would like to have between now and we have a June 3rd public hearing. We have tentatively scheduled, would like to adopt the budget at the June 17th meeting. And the reason is because that is the last scheduled meeting for the City Council. The City Council, of course, has until midnight on June 30th to adopt the budget, but that does require you to either carry over the hearing, you know, you all have the legalese that you do with that. So you do have until that, but we're trying to do it in a timely manner because I will say that once the council adopts the budget, there is an extremely large amount of work that Finance Department has to do in order to get that budget, so come July 1, we can start spending and that we're not, you know, holding people up with payroll and things of that nature. So really your decision tonight, you know, from May the 20th until June the 3rd, what kind of budget work sessions would you like to have? What kind of discussion would you like for your staff to prepare for? And then from June the 3rd to June the 17th, what types of meetings or work sessions would you like to have? So does that answer your question, Mayor?
It does. Thank
Okay,
you.
very good. All right. So thank you for having me here tonight. I want to say thanks to the city manager and to all city staff in help of preparing this budget, this 500, 600-page document that you have, and then this probably 80 or 90-page summary booklet that you have would not be possible without all these folks doing their part. I mean, hundreds of hours go into the preparation of this budget. We do the heaviest preparation in probably the last 2.5 months, but actually it does happen all year round, and it would not be possible if everybody did not do their part. I definitely want to say a special thank you to the Finance Department and especially my core team, Terry, Dre, and Chestine, that really do prepare a lot of this, so it makes our life a little bit easier as we try to present this to the council, so thank you to them. And so I always start off by talking to the council, telling them that the budget is really one of your most important fiscal responsibilities that you carry out as an elected leader for the city of Goldsboro. So it is very important. I want you to understand that management and staff understand how important this is. We take it very seriously. We do not make the requests that we make lightly, and we understand that there is a significant public impact to this budget because we understand that you are trying to get things done. You are trying to protect the health, safety, and welfare of your citizens of Goldsboro. You are trying to provide for them cultural and recreational activities. You're trying to provide for transportation, all those constitutional things that the state of North Carolina has set out before you that you can do, you are trying to accomplish with this budget. So everything that we do, whatever requests we ask for, whatever things we cut, we take it very seriously, okay? So I just want to set that out as kind of the stage of where we're going. So tonight before you, we have the summary 24-25 budget with a manager's recommended budget of approximately $86.5 million in comparison to a prior year adopted budget of $76.6 million. That is not the final amended budget, okay? That is the actual adopted budget that was adopted in June of 2023. That is an approximate increase of $9.9 million. I will point out that in this pie chart that you see before you in the green is the general fund, representing about $56 million, which is about 65% of the $86 billion budget. The utility fund at $25.7 million is roughly about 30% of the budget. So the operating budget makes up about 94%. It's made up of your general fund and your utility fund. Now, when you look at the pie chart in the previous fiscal year, it's really not that much. It's not materially different. It's about the same, even though the number is almost $10 million more. Next slide, please. I provide this, it's too tiny to read, but this is also within your manager's recommended detail book, and the front of the book is a summary. And it shows you the trend, and there's certain data we have to provide to the council, so we provide you the actuals, the department request, what their June 30th estimate, managers recommended. The final book will have a column for adopted. So it kind of shows you a trend so you can look at your figures as they've changed over the past basically 3 fiscal years. So I just want to point this out in the far right-hand column. I know the public can't see, it's probably too small. The manager recommended, you will see that every line for every fund is 0. And in accordance with general statute, the manager is required to present the council a balanced budget, which the manager has done. And that is that at the bottom right-hand corner, the $86.5 million total. Next slide. So the next slide, what we do is we provide you an expenditure summary to talk to you about how are we spending this $86.5 million. And so what we do is we categorize it in some basic categories: salary and benefits, operational costs, debt service, vehicle and capital outlay, and shared services and transfers. Salary and benefits is at the top because it takes up the most of that $86.5 million. As the manager said, this is a personnel-driven budget. So out of that $86.5 billion is $42 million in personnel. Now, I do want to say on the far right total column, there's an asterisk. Below that, what I'm telling you is that there are several, they're really small funds, so the total that I gave you, $86.5 million, is correct. We just eliminate them from this summary so it's easier for the public and for the council to read. But like I said, the big gist that you need to understand is that $42 million that is driving this budget is going to be about 50% of the total $86.5 million. And let me point out that in the first column, the general fund column, you see $35.9 million. That represents 85% of the $42 million. So what we're saying to you is that personnel cost is driven by the general fund, which is why when you think about what funds each fund, well, property taxes, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, funds the vast majority. Of that, $42 million is funded out of the general fund. So when we talk about where's the money come from, how are you going to pay for it? Well, it's got to come out of the general fund, okay? Utility fund in the salaries and benefits, that's about 12%. Then when you look at the next cost, operational cost, so, you know, that's the everything else. Those are contract services, those are materials, those are supplies, those are dues and subscriptions, education, things like that. You will see that in a slide in just a little bit. That makes up $21.2 million, that's in the far right column. And so that's about 26% of that $86 million total. And of that, the general fund makes up almost $13 million, which is about 61% of that total. And then again, we give you debt service because that's required by law to show you about 9% of the city's budget is dedicated to paying debt payments. So that's about $7.4 million. Now, I do want to say that when we look at the salary and benefits line item 1, now that includes full salaries. So in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23, we experienced a significant reduction because we used ARPA funding, ARPA grant funding to pay for salaries. So now, you know, you say, well, yes, we have had salary increases. We've had a modest amount of FTEs, but now we're looking at the full weight of all those ARPA salaries coming back into the general fund. So that's kind of a, you know, another impacting factor that you have to think about on that as well. Next slide. And so this expenditure summary is basically, this pie chart is basically a representation of what we just saw in the chart on the previous page. As the manager said, $86.5 million budget. This is a personnel-driven budget. So on the fund summary that I briefly went through on slide 6 with all the columns and showing you the balanced budget. So if you were to look at that slide, you would see that the department request, the difference between that and the manager recommended, it started with a $14.6 million deficit in the general fund. We had to get that to zero. So, you know, the council may say, well, how did you get to that number? And I did print that because I did at least want to talk to you about it and tell you how we got to that number. So, before anything, we looked, what can we cut, right? Because we didn't automatically go to, we're going to increase property taxes. So what we looked at is we cut, the manager cut actually, over $8 million in capital. Okay, again, taking this very seriously, the departments felt like they needed it. He felt like we could not afford it. So he cut $8 million there. We cut $500,000 in paving. We cut about $500,000 in new position requests that were felt needed, but we couldn't fund it. So that got cut. And then after all of that, we looked and we still had $1.6 million to cut. So the manager asked me to reach out to the department heads in the general fund, cut $1.6 million from your operating budget. They did, okay? And then we looked at how much of a property tax increase would we need without cutting more. Because the one thing I will say to you is that the consequences of cutting those operating budgets is serious. Because when something comes up that's not budgeted, the manager or the council says this needs to be done, the department heads are going to have to try to figure out, can I make it happen? And there's a good chance we can't, okay? So the council needs to understand the consequences of that. The department heads do a phenomenal job of juggling their responsibilities, their budget, and making things happen, because we always want to be, yes, we can, not no, we can't, okay? But I just want you to understand, cutting that $1.6 million out of operations may affect operations in the general fund. And I think that's all I have on that slide. If you'll go to the next one. Okay, this slide, so, you know, we've talked about, we're going to talk a little bit about operational costs. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but what this slide is over the years, we have picked various categories of expenses that have been brought out. So we try to list out what those categories are, and each column represents the fund, while the final column on the far right is the total. So we talked about the 21.2, which was on slide 7 in operating expenditures, because we talked about personnel, that was 42 million. The next big driver was operational cost at 21.2 million. So this kind of gives you a breakdown. So this summarizes the big book that you have that's got all the departmental requests and all that line item detail, that's that 500 or 600 page book. This kind of breaks it down in a nutshell where those costs are at, okay? So we're not going to spend time. We can in future work sessions if the council has particular questions or particular areas. You just have to give us guidance on what you're looking for, what you would like to know, and then we, the staff, can work on that with departments to get that analysis for you. So next slide. So this is kind of like a little agenda, if you will. We've been through the introduction, and I've just been through the summary. Then the sections 2 through 9, I'm going to go through some in more detail than others. But essentially, we're going to start at talking about the revenues, and then we're going to go through other sections of the budget, operating expenditures, and position summary, and so forth. So I just wanted to let you know that that's what that was for. And then it's just going to get progressively in more detail. So the first slide that we have for you here is, we're talking about, like I said, the general fund is the big driver of this budget. So the general fund, which amounts to about 56 million of the $86.5 million budget, the revenues basically are coming from the first line, and I know it's difficult to read, but tax revenues make up about 42% of that $56 million budget. Revenue from other agencies, which is the third line down, makes up about 31%. Between those two, that's about 73% of that $56 million budget. So, when we look at the general fund, that $56 million, out of that $86.5 million, that's about 65%. So it's the big one in the room, okay? And then what I will say as far as like the total, so we look at the second to the last column, the change. We're talking about an adopted budget going from about 49.6 million to about 55.9 million, which is about $6.3 million. The three biggest drivers are your property tax of an additional 4.0, or basically 4.1 million. Revenue from other agencies, about 747,000, which is primarily driven by sales tax and utility franchise tax, and then capital return. So that is debt borrowing, and that is investment income. So that's where that $6.3 million, that difference is that we're talking about to fund that general fund. So otherwise, most of the other revenues are flat in comparison to talking about a $55 million budget, okay? So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. One other thing I will add to this is Matt had asked me what was the public safety total in relation to property taxes. And when I totaled that up, so that's your police, your fire, and your building inspections, it comes up to about $24.4 million. We have about $23 million in property tax revenue coming up. So it's about 104% of the total. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not, Matt.
I've just used that as a benchmark. That you don't really want to draw a whole lot more from it. It's just a good benchmark.
Okay.
It just educates the public, just the property taxes usually on par with what your public safety expenses are. And hopefully when our property tax improves, we'll be able to, you don't want to surpass that number, but we'll be able to do more.
Yes, and we know things are a little out of kilter as far as our property tax goes. Next slide. So the next couple of slides go into a little bit more detail about the general fund revenue, and we draw some comparisons in one column, the adopted budget from the current fiscal year, that we're in, and then the manager's recommended budget, and then I have a column that shows the percent change, and then the dollar increase or decrease in the far right-hand column. What I would ask you to pay more attention to is the top line. So the difference between adopted and recommended, it's about a 21% increase and a little over $4 million. So that is, the majority of that is going to be that 15-cent tax increase that is being recommended. Then I would call your attention to, if you go down to the third section called Revenue, Other Agencies. So there we have sales tax and utility franchise tax. And so those two, as far as the increase that I could justify, as I created my trend calculations for this, it was roughly about $700,000, about an additional $266 in sales tax and about an extra $536 in utility franchise tax. And I will say, even the League of Municipalities, when we got their projections, they were very much more conservative this year than I've ever seen them in any years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the uncertainty of the economy. It has to do with consumer spending. It has to do with, I don't know exactly the terminology, but essentially it's consumers maxing out their credit, so kind of coming to the end of that. So at that point, when they've spent all they can, or the banks or the credit card company said, we're telling you you're done spending, there can be some downward pressure and cause your sales tax and even your utility franchise tax, because it's consumption driven, it could cause that to go down. So I was very leery about trying to get over aggressive, trying to budget those revenues, but we were able to, like I said, eke out about another $700,000, which roughly equates to maybe about 3 pennies on the tax rate. Okay, so we're going to skip to the next slide because most of those other changes are just very immaterial. So the other thing I would call your attention to is the last line item is the fund balance withdrawal. As the manager mentioned, a little over $1 million we're recommending to withdraw out of fund balance, which, as he said, equates to, probably 4.5 pennies, somewhere in that range. And then again, on the far right column, the net increase decrease, as we said, we're approximating a little over $6 million increase in general fund revenue, and that ties with that slide 12 chart that I showed you. Next slide. So the other topic that we're going to talk a little bit about, so we talked about budget. The other thing we have to talk about is fiscal health, okay? And what this chart provides for the council is a trend analysis of budgeted revenues up to actual revenues, and showing that for, probably the past 16 years or so. And the red line represents what the budget was. This is how much budget revenue we think we're going to get in. The green line represents how much actually came in. Now, I will say, for fiscal '24, that's an estimate because I'm still crystal ball trying to guess what we're going to get by June 30th of '24, so it's the best that I could do. So the reason we bring this up, ideally that far right column that says shortfall and excess, ideally you want it to be zero, right? So if I budgeted $1 million, then $1 million came in, I had no variance, I had no shortfall, I had no excess. However, that is not practical. So shortfalls can generally arise when the council has either appropriated fund balance, which means you expected to use part of your fund balance, so your revenue is going to be less than what you budgeted. Or a not so good thing is when your revenues are over or under your estimated budget. So red is not always bad, okay? So if the council expects to appropriate fund balance, you expect you're going to have a shortfall, okay? So that's expected. What the problem is you don't want that difference in the red is to be unexpected, because that means you probably budgeted your expenditures to the hilt, and if they get spent 100% and your revenue doesn't come in, you know what happens? Fund balance goes down, right? Because you're in the red. You have spent more than what you've taken in. So we use this slide to help guide us. And I will say in a couple of the really big years in fiscal 19 and 20, the 6.858 and the $3 million that are in the red, those were anticipated, most of it was anticipated fund balance appropriated usage. So that was expected. It wasn't that somebody budgeted really bad and we came up short, but most of that was planned fund balance usage. And I will say sometimes being in the black is not a good thing, because what happens is if you're in the black and you say, well, I was going to get $1 million in revenue, but I got $2 million, then that means you did not execute programs to help your citizens and your taxpayers, right? Because you shorted them. But now if it's planned because you're trying to build your fund balance, being in the black is okay. But again, it's all about trying to predict, because we got a plan. That's what this budget is. It is a working financial plan. So we bring this up to you just to say that that's why that's important. We focus a lot on expenditures. So sometimes it's good for us to also look at the revenues and how those are budgeted and how they come out as far as what our expectations are. That's going to lead to our next slide, please.
Ms. Catherine, can I
Yes.
ask you a quick question?
Yes,
On
ma'am.
that 5.19 million, can you tell me about what month that was up to?
So this is through June 30th.
Through-
This is my
through June
best
30th,
estimate. And
okay.
what I will say there is, and I did put that note, the last bullet, so we appropriated $4.69 million in appropriated fund balance. We also will have $1.79 million in debt that will not be taken. So that's going to approximate where your $5 million is. And then, and I'm glad you brought that up, Ms. Weeks, because on that fund summary slide that I showed you, when you look at the column that says estimated June 30th, the net is about $3.5 million in the hole. Well, what that tells you is you have partly a shortfall of revenue because you use fund balance. The other thing is that we saved money, so we're going to have lapsed expenditures that are not going to get spent, so we're going to ramp our spending down. So that's why it's not, the negative on that slide is not 5.19 million, because we're going to have expenditure savings, so that it's going to tune it down to, we hope, around 3.5 million. And the fact that we appropriated 4.7 million, but we only need to use 3.5 speaks well for the city, because we had planned. We just don't want to use more than what we've appropriated. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, all right, because it can be a little bit difficult. So then that leads us into the next slide when we talk about general fund balance. So just very, very simplistic is your fund balance is basically your increase in your net equity as compared to that particular year's expenditures. And fund balance percentage is something that, you know, we talk about a lot of dollars, but we also talk a lot about percentages because it helps us, I guess, compare ourselves to prior trends. It also helps us compare ourselves to other entities, right? So what I presented here is about a 16-year trend analysis for fund balance from the audits. And then the only thing I will say, fiscal 23 is estimated because we're still trying to get our audit completed, so we don't know what that number is yet. And then fiscal 24 is obviously estimated because we're not there as well. And I will point out to you that in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23, both those years were ARPA grant years. So that initial percentage, and I told the previous council, I don't necessarily know that I've said it to this council, but the previous council that sat, that 38.02, it's the right number, but it's a little misleading because, again, this is a percentage of expenditures. Well, the expenditures were reduced because of ARPA. So that kind of inflated. You don't have an apples-to-apples comparison. As I told the previous council, if it were an apples-to-apples comparison, you're probably looking somewhere around the mid-20s, maybe 25 to 30% instead of the 38.02. However, I'm going to point you back, looking at fiscal 23, I'm predicting like 45%, and I mean, this is just a really wide guess, so please don't, you know, come back and say, Catherine, you said 45% and it's not, and you beat me up over it, okay? Because it's just an estimate. But if you look back at that fund summary sheet that I told you, the big picture, if you look at that first column, which says fiscal 23 actuals, it shows on that first line, general fund, a $5.5 million net increase. Now, is all of that going to go to fund balance? No, but there's going to be a good portion of it. So even though in fiscal 23, you know, the two things that help keep that number where I think it's going to be 45% are the fact that you've got reduced personnel expenditures because of the ARPA grant being in the other fund. And the other thing is you've also got an increase in the net general fund. So we had more money coming in than we had going out in fiscal 23. So I fully expect that fund balance to go up some. Now, fiscal 24, I've already told you from the previous slide, we expect to use fund balance. So the other piece of that is in fiscal 24, you have a full year of full payroll expenditures, no ARPA grant offset. So that's going to bring that percentage down as well as the use of fund balance, because in fiscal 24 you kind of get back to the apples to apples where payroll expenses are where they should be. They're not reduced by a grant fund. So I think that was a big thing I wanted to point out to the council. And I think the other thing is that far right column is the average of units without an electric utility along with them in that population range that we're in. And you will see from the trend, most all municipal units without electric are significantly more than the city of Goldsboro. And previous councils have made it a priority to work on their fiscal health. This council, I think, has tried to do that as well. So does the city need to be at 67%? Not necessarily. I mean, it is up to the council to kind of make those decisions. But the one thing I will tell you is that your fund balance is an emergency fund. All right, so the manager has proposed using a little over $1 million in fund balance. But the problem is using it for recurring expenditures. I would tell you that the LGC would frown upon that, so that's why we tried to be so judicious about how much we used. You can't come and say, well, I don't want a property tax increase. I want to use all my fund balance for recurring expenditures. That will absolutely bring them down here and standing in front of you, okay? You can't do that. Your fund balance is supposed to be used for emergency purposes or for one-time expenditure. So, you know, let's say you had a major accident with your fire truck and you needed a new fire truck. Well, that's a one-time major purchase that I think would be acceptable. So I think in my professional opinion, I cannot recommend using more fund balance because that is not what the intent is, okay? And then you have to think about what, you know, God forbid, but what if we have a major hurricane or a major disaster and the city's got to front $3 or $4 million worth of cleanup and debris cost? Where's the money going to come from? So that's what your fund balance is there for. So I just make that comment. So next slide. Okay, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit, still talking about revenues coming in, but we're going to talk about user self-sufficiency in the general fund. So we have 4 programs or operations, if you will: refuse or solid waste collection, the golf course, the Paramount Theater, and the Goldsboro Event Center. And what I provided you is a trend analysis from fiscal 21, and then fiscal 24 is estimated, fiscal 25 is obviously estimated. Now, ideally, what you would like to see is for that number to be 100%. So what does 100% mean? It means break even. It means that what I anticipated, what I brought in for revenue, I spent in expenditures. Now, these programs, if you will, are not in an enterprise fund. It's in the general fund. The general fund is the city's main governmental fund. So there is not necessarily a profit motive that goes along with these. So what you would like to see is something close to 100% if possible. So when you see a number that's under 100%, that means it is subsidized by the general fund. So it is being subsidized or paid for by either property tax dollars or shared revenue, right? Because the charges for services, which that is included, I gave you some analysis up here earlier in some of the slides that talked about charges for services, but it's not being offset by charges for services. And I will say that in looking at 24, you know, some of the numbers are kind of low, but when I looked at the trend in prior years, the department heads usually they're kind of conservative. So I think that they kind of feel like, well, I think I'm going to spend all of this, and then they don't, and then their self-sufficiency when the actual comes in, like in 22, 23, it went way up. So, for example, the golf course, he had predicted something very much lower, something maybe in the 50 or 60%. Well, in the actuals, he's at 98%, so he almost recovered, Obi through his operations has recovered almost 100% of what the golf course spends in order to operate it. And it's the same thing with the event center. They probably were in the 40-something% estimated, but when the actuals came through, 94%. So almost every dollar that was spent, they recouped it. And again, this is general fund, so we have to look at what constitutional purposes that we're providing for. And with those, the last 3, you know, we're providing cultural and recreational benefits and opportunities for the citizens and visitors in the city of Goldsboro. And then I will make one comment about the Paramount. So their percentage has generally stayed in the 50% recovery. And according to the North Carolina average for municipal venues, it's about 37%. So since Mr. Twist has been here, he's done an excellent job of maintaining a great cost recovery effort for the Paramount Theater. So, next slide, please. Okay, I gotta take a swallow of water, my mouth's getting dry.
Oh, of course.
Yes, sir.
And so you all know, I didn't preface the ground rules for this, but council, if you have questions as Ms. Gwen is going, ask them. This is not the only time that we, as council members, have to ask questions, as was already discussed. But if you do have questions, feel free to inject. I do want to make sure that we're able to get through this thing, but yeah, by all means, please.
Okay, just a quick question for the solid waste. The percentage, if I understand correctly, that we're looking at is based on total income and total operational cost. For example, for solid waste gives us that percentage.
Yes, sir.
So if we said, okay, we want to see that closer to 100%, then the path to that would be increasing the rate that we charge for solid waste
Yes, sir.
to shift that. Gotcha.
Absolutely, you got that right, that's exactly.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
percentage was reflective of 100% in, 100% out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir, you're
Which-
absolutely right.
Factors in if you said, okay, well, we lost 2 trucks this year, so that's why
Yes, sir.
we're riding the wave, so to speak.
Absolutely, you're
Okay.
exactly right.
That was my only question.
And just subsidizing some of your parks and recreational activities, it helps keep it affordable for those who may not be able to afford it, but giving them that opportunity to participate.
Yeah, just on the cost recovery element of this is that some of the services that we provide, they wouldn't be able to be, you couldn't have them for some people because of the
Understand.
cost, if we really truly cover indirect and direct costs.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So the next couple of slides that we're going to hit are really going to hit a lot at property taxes, which I know is really the biggest topic in the room. So property taxes in the general fund make up approximately 42%, as I showed you on that earlier pie chart slide, of all the general fund revenues. That 56 million, about 42% of it comes from our property taxes. On this slide, this bar chart, on the very left-hand side, that represents what the tax values are. And then on the very far right-hand side of the graph, the percentages is the percent change. And so that's the up and down in the green line. The blue bars represent the actual property tax values. So property tax revenue in the general fund, it's a function of a very simple formula. It takes what the property is assessed at and multiplies it by the property tax rate. That's how we come up with the property tax revenue. So changes to either side of that equation make changes in your revenue. So it's important to recognize not just, well, the property tax rate we're proposing is increasing, you got to look at what is the value that it's being assessed at. Now, this trend really analyzes about 16 years. So starting in fiscal 9 up until about till fiscal 25, there's been about a $600 million increase in property tax value. So we went from about $2 billion to about $2.6 billion, which is steady, but it's not, jumping out and, really hitting us between the faces. This is a huge jump in property tax values. So if you looked at the rate of growth in the past 16 years, it's about 30%. But if you go to like the CPI calculators at the Federal Reserve, for instance, inflation's been 45%. Well, in my book, if inflation, the cost of stuff, is gone up 45%, but our value's gone up 30%, somewhere we're missing, okay? So that's one of the points that I wanted to make in this slide. So right now, the Wayne County Tax Administrator is in the process of doing a reappraisal. The reappraisal will be effective January 2025, so they're right in the middle of it right now, and we don't know how their values are coming out, how they're getting calculated. This is actually on a 6-year cycle. The law, state law requires it to be done on an octennial basis, which means every 8 years, unless your sales ratio goes above It's 90% and maybe 110%. It's in the book. I did write that in there, but there's a range. And so what happened with the city of Goldsboro is our sales ratio went below that 90%, which means that things that were selling higher than what the appraised value was, because you're taxed on a value that's established at our last reevaluation, which was in 2019. So our current actual tax rate, so the rate at which the taxpayers pays is 73 cents, okay? 73 pennies. While the effective tax rate, which is really based on that sales ratio, is about 51 cents. That's a big difference. So it's kind of like it does, kind of an inflation factor, if you will. So really, we're only getting like 51 pennies, not 73. So that's part of the reason we're having to ask for a tax increase. If the reappraisal had happened this year and we had a different answer, we probably would see that our values have gone up significantly. So the thing that I just want to point out is that the city has seen tremendous cost increases in the cost of doing business, but we have not seen a substantial increase in the property tax revenues to help offset those costs. So next slide, please. Okay. The only thing about this is also in your book. I have a trend analysis that probably goes back to around 2001, 2002, but I put an excerpt of this, and basically it tells you in the first column with the numbers, those are the assessed property tax values as per the county tax administrator. It shows you the tax rate in the next column, and then the tax revenue in the far right column. This is just to provide you additional supporting data to the various graphs that I'm providing to you, okay? And it is also presented in the front part of your big book as well. So next slide. So this is an important slide because this shows the property tax rate trend and the effective tax rate comparison. So in the far left column, the values are the actual tax rates, okay? The blue bar represents what the actual tax rate is for the city of Goldsboro. The orange bar represents the effective tax rate. So what the North Carolina Department of Revenue, and anybody can go out there on the website and look at it, you can pull the effective tax rate and it'll show for every county and every municipality, it'll show the tax rate, the county rate, the total combined rate, and then there's what's called an effective rate. And that effective rate is based on that sales ratio. So if the sales ratio is 100%, so basically your tax rate equals, and your value equals what your sales are, then it's going to be 100%, so there is no different. Your tax rate 65, then your effective rate 65. But what happens is if that value goes higher or lower, that's what changes that effective tax rate. And what I will point out, and I probably could have done this, I probably should have added it to the slide. If you look at that orange line starting in fiscal 21, you will see that it's just decreasing, and I know probably the public can't see this on the slide, but at the bottom of the table, it shows you the actual rate in blue and the orange effective rate. So in fiscal 20, that was the reappraisal year. So that year, effective rate was 65 cents. Our tax rate was 65%. That's that 100% ratio. But in fiscal 21, it becomes 64 cents effective, so that was a penny we lost. Fiscal 22, it went to 64 cents. So, and our tax rate increased. That was the year the council did a 3-penny tax increase to help build fund balance, to address fund balance issues. But at that point, we're 4 pennies down. In fiscal 23, it's an effective tax rate of 57 cents while we had 68. That's 11 pennies. Fiscal 24, 70, we had a tax increase in fiscal 24 to 73 cents, but the effective tax rate's 51, which is 22 pennies short. So if you just looked at fiscal 23, that's about a $2.5 million loss in revenue. If you look at fiscal 24, that's $5.1 million. So when we talk about struggling and trying to find and do things and make sure things are done, programs are done, you know, we are suffering from a decrease in the actual revenue because of the sales ratio, okay? So what we're hoping is that when the reappraisal comes about, that we see a substantial increase in that property tax. So we hope to see not 2.6 billion, we want to see a higher number. And then what we will do when we prepare the fiscal '26 budget, as required by statute, we have to calculate what the revenue neutral rate is, right? And so we have to tell council. Council can accept it, they can go up, they can go down. So it's going to be funding what needs that the council decides are priorities for them. So I think this is an important slide because, like I said, when you look at that graph starting in fiscal '21, that orange line is going down, that's lost revenue. We're never going to get that money back, right? Because that time's gone, that tax period's gone. So we're trying to catch up from behind. So that's what I'm saying. That's why this is such an important budget. And I know it's difficult with the tax increase, but I just want to make sure the council understands how that's impacting the city and the departments. So next slide. So this slide, it also focuses on, again, that property valuation, so the $2.6 billion that I talk about, and it shows a trend for about the past 16 years. And the blue line at the very top is total tax value. The red line below that in red, that's just real property, so that's like your land and your buildings and things like that. The green line, way down at the bottom, that's actually personal property, so that would be like cars and boats and things of that nature. And then the purple line are public service companies, so that would be like Duke Progress, Piedmont, AT&T, Spectrum, those kinds of companies. And I think the big takeaway from me on this slide is that, yes, there is an increase. So you started in 2009 at $2 billion, you're up to $2.6 billion. It's moving up, but I wouldn't say at like a astronomical pace. So that's the big takeaway on this slide. Okay, next slide. So this slide talks about what is a penny worth. What is a penny worth of tax for the city of Goldsboro? So the proposed tax increase, the net that we're kind of anticipating is about $3.8 million. A penny generates approximately $264,000, which you see in the far right column, the very last bar, that's $264,000. And the thing is that that's not what we actually net. We only net, so if we charge a penny, we only actually get about $233,000. And the reason is you have to pay collection fees to Wayne County, you got to pay it to North Carolina Department of Revenue. The other thing is by state statute, you can budget no more than what your current property tax collection rate is. So if my current year tax collection rate's 95%, I can only budget 95% of that revenue, and the legislature did that on purpose because they didn't want you to over budget. They wanted you to be able to build maybe a little bit of fund balance. So that's one reason that there's such a disparity between the 264 and the 233. And again, I'll remind you that property tax makes up 42% of that $56 million general fund revenue. And as I said, Wayne County's in the process of doing a reappraisal, which will be effective on January 1 of 2025. So next slide. So I know this is a little challenging to read, so I apologize. It is also in your book. I do want to make a comment. The slide in the book showed 18-cent tax increase, and the figures on that are correct, but it should have been 15 cents. We were going back and forth in various versions, so I apologize for that. This slide that shows the 15th penny increase is the correct number. So we tried to predict how does this affect the average residential homeowner. So what I did was I asked the tax administrator, okay, tell me what is the average residential value. Okay, so I'm talking about appraised tax value, not what like real estate realtor.com value is. And he said, Catherine, that's a really tough number. He said, so what he did was he pulled at all the residential properties within the city of Goldsboro. It came up to about $1.9 billion. And it was 25,000 properties. So simple math, 1.9 billion divided by the 25,000. So where we came up with is an average value of about 88,000. And so that's that first line on that table. The second line, so if it's a median home value sold, according to Realtor.com, it was 210. According to Zillow, it was like 195,000. And then the last line, I just said, let's just do an even 100,000 because that makes the math a little bit easier. So if your taxable value on your home is 88,000, a 15-cent tax increase will be $132 per year, okay? That amounts to about $11 per month in addition, or 36 cents per day. And again, like I said, if your home value, if it's $100,000, the impact's $150 per year. If it's $200,000, it's $300, just to make the math a little bit easier, to help the council and the public understand, how does this affect my bill, okay? And that's pretty much what I wanted to say on that slide, so we can move on to the next one. Okay. So, according to department heads, we have no other general fund fee changes, so I just wanted to make that clear. Next slide. So we're going to talk just a little bit about utility fund revenues. So in the charges for services in the recommended budget, I have included the 7% increase in water and sewer rates across all classes. The one thing that I will make, to just point out to the council, in fund balance withdrawal, in the past, we have not had to use fund balance in the utility fund. We are this year. When the manager was going through the capital, I mean, we have got some major, as the council's aware, we got some really major utility projects coming up. And as you know, they have to be funded through the utility fund rates. It's not money we're going to borrow. This is not grant related. These are things that have to be paid for. So we felt like we had to dip into the fund balance in the utility fund to the tune of about $560,000. So that, all that being said, the total increase from the prior adopted budget is about $2.3 million from the prior year to help fund all of the requests that were in the utility fund. Next slide. This slide just, we updated the water and sewer rates for the various rates and classes to show the current, and then the proposed shows the 7% increase. Next slide.
If you would. Ms.
Yes,
Wood, Go back one slide for me.
Okay.
So on this one, and again, I won't be able to get through all this, so that's why I've been kind of staying quiet on this one. On this one, there's another rate that is a capitalized rate for certain industries that have bought into our system. I don't know that now is really the right time to unpackage that ball of yarn, but if we are able to make adjustments there, that would offset some of this increase to where this increase is not 7%.
Are you talking about negotiated rates?
Yes.
Well, that's a whole different ballgame. That's the
Yeah.
manager, yeah.
So there is provisions in the agreements that we can change these rates.
And that's all. I mostly was just making that point for those watching at home and kind of following along. This is all, if everything stays the same, here's a slide and here's how the math would work out. But just know there is other work that's still going on to try to avoid having to do
Right.
at least that amount right there on the water and sewer rates.
And of course, the 7% rate increase, we had talked with Stantec when they did their presentation at the council retreat in February. They talked about a range, you know, what could we do with some grant funding, no grant funding. So we were kind of between that 6 and 8%. So that's kind of how we landed on the 7% recommended, okay?
And this one does include it's 7% for everybody, including those capitalized rates.
It does? Okay, thank you.
It's in their page. It's everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We could,
Okay,
could do
so the
something, look at
next
something
slide, the next two slides were prepared by Stantec. And so we asked them, you know, try to give us something, you know, in a table and in a graph that shows us how is our typical customer going to be impacted. So with an average consumption of about 5,000 gallons, if you look, Goldsboro currently, we're at about $84.45. So we're a little less than the middle of the road. And then with a 7% increase, we would be a little bit higher, about 4.36% increase, and the average bill would be about $90.34 a month in comparison to an average bill of $86.54. Next slide. So this is just a bar chart that depicts that same information on the previous table to show you where Goldsboro is just a little bit below the average currently. And then if you look, it's been moved up in the 25, it's third from the far right. So it'll be just a little bit above what the average is for the peer group that was selected.
And that's peer group current year. We don't know what adjustments they're going to be making.
I mean, that's true,
Okay.
absolutely, yes, sir. Okay. And so there are no other changes to utility fees, other utility fees in this proposed budget other than the 7% rate increase. Next slide. And so stormwater utility fund, there are no proposed changes to the fiscal 25 stormwater rates. The last rate increase was fiscal 24 of 5%. Next slide. So the only thing I would point out to the council on this, we started with an adopted amended budget of 1.9 million. We ended up with a recommended budget around 1.7 million, and the reason for the most of it is no proposed debt, okay? So that's why it's going down. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about debt. And so this first slide, so this is the debt payment funding. You've got a column showing your 24 adopted, your 25 recommended, the increase or decrease, and you've got it by fund. So we have to, in accordance with General Statute 159.13, the council must appropriate all debt service in the adopted budget. So you got to pay your debt, okay? So we had adopted about 7.7 million. We're 7.3 million. The whole thing is the net. We're not taking on any more new debt, so we should see our debt service decreasing. And what happens when you decrease debt service is decrease of an expense, which means you've got the ability to fund other expenses, which is one reason we didn't have to pull quite so much out of fund balances, because we did see, like in the utility fund, we did see some of that savings, and same thing in the general fund. So we were able to use that to help fund operations, okay? Next slide. So the next two slides, I know it's tiny, but what we do here is we present the different buckets of debt. The city has general obligation debt, and if the public's not aware, that is debt that is voted on by the taxpayers, okay? That was approved. The next bucket of debt would be the state revolving loan funds, which that comes from generally North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. That's all utility related, and then you'll also see some installment financing debt on the next slide. So the one thing I will point out to you here on the general obligation debt, the first two lines, we have two pieces of debt that are being paid off fiscal year 24. So it's paid off in fiscal 25, no more debt service. And the other thing I'll point out to you, the subtotal, the GO bonds, that at the end of 25, when we make those debt payments, we will go from $11.5 million in debt, GO debt, to $9.9 million. In the same vein with state revolving loan funds, we're going to go from about $14.1 million to about $13 million in debt for the city. And I would say, we know with the CIP, just the utility CIP that's coming down the pike. Obviously 200 plus million is not coming at one time, but it's important to see your debt service going down, because like I said, they don't let you finance debt forever. You've got maybe 15 years, maybe 20, if they're forgiving, and they allow you that extra space. But, it's a lot to think that the city's got a lot of utility debt that's getting ready to come up. So we like to see that number going down. Next slide. And then this details out all the installment financing. So the installment financing is, some of it was building improvements, land improvements, and a lot of it is for rolling stock in vehicles. And so where we are there is we have about 17 million in outstanding. At the end of 25, with those debt payments, will be down to about 14.5 million. So the city will actually see its total overall debt in 24 from 43 million go down to about 37 million. And then below that at the bottom of the table, you'll see that's broken down by fund. They're just totals. So for the general fund, at the end of fiscal 25, the city will have about $18.5 million in all types of debt, but about 18.5. Utility funds, 18.7 million. So that's what makes up that $37 million in debt. And so the difference between the two fiscal years is we will be paying down about $5.8 million in principal on this debt to get us to that $37 million. Okay, next slide. So this slide is just proposed new debt service. Well, the thing to kind of keep in mind is that there is a large CIP project that the manager is spearheading that will come to the council probably in the late summer, fall of this year, okay? And that is really going to drastically change what this slide here would reflect when we get to next fiscal year. So right now, really the only thing we have out there in a project fund is Harmon Park Center, $11.7 million. I don't think that that's viable, but we haven't really had a conversation about doing away with it, but that's the only thing that's out there. I will say food for thought, because it doesn't have to be Harmon Park Center, it could be something else. But debt service on, a $12 million building is gonna run a little over $1 million. That's about a little over 4.5 pennies on the tax rate. We do not have money to pay 4.5 pennies in addition on debt service on a new building. So substitute in there public safety building or fire complex or whatever else you want to substitute in there. I'm just saying to prepare yourselves, because when the CIP, not utility, but we're talking about building and infrastructure CIP comes to you later this year, you have to think about what is the timing of that CIP? When have we got to put it in place? What can we afford to do? And how can we kind of, couch that so that the city can afford to do it and function and have the necessary facilities that it needs? And then, of course, I have the 24-25 rolling stock. That's going to be about $4.5 million. Now, that we anticipate there to be enough change in the debt service because we only do that over 5 years. It will drop off enough, we feel like, that we can fund that within existing means that we have right now. So next one. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of those payroll expenses that we referenced earlier, $42 million, but now we're going to talk about them in terms of position count. All right, so the city manager has recommended 2 new positions, planning, a minimum housing inspector, in community development, a community relations and development specialist. Those are the only 2 positions included in the manager recommended budget. Next slide. We had a lot of positions that were requested. The departments felt like they had the need in their department to be efficient and to take care of the services that are being asked of them. There were a total of about 6 that were not funded. So we provide you this list just so that you understand what needs are sitting out there in the departments. Next slide. So this table, the slide 7 we talked about, they had the $42 million in salaries and benefits. This provides you an employee count, a historical trend. So in the far left column, fiscal year, that shows you the position count, and then the columns, before the blue break in the middle, the public safety positions trend from 2015 through the recommended of 2025, and then the non-public safety positions, and then the total in the general fund. So the total in the general fund in this fiscal year is 412.2 full-time positions. Then on the right-hand side of the blue bar, in the stormwater, you see those totals in a historical trend, then the utility fund, the occupancy tax fund, and then the final column, the total. So for the current, or the fiscal year that we're proposing 496 full-time positions. We were at 494 in the current fiscal year, but again, as I said, the manager is recommending adding 2 new positions. So that's how we get to the 496, and the 496 equates into the $42 million salary and benefit costs that we talked about. Next slide. And so just to give you some additional information, just permanent part-time positions, we did have 11 in the current fiscal year. We're recommending 10 in fiscal 25, and the reduction of the 1 permanent part-time position was the conversion that the HR director, Bernadette Dove, brought to the council. There were 2 that were reduced, but it ended up not quite working out, so we only ended up reducing by 1 permanent part-time position. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. It's just a total of 10. Yes, sir.
I do recall, this might be getting in the weeds and we're not there yet, but I do recall there were 3 frozen fire department positions. Are they unfroze in this recommended budget?
I don't have that information, so I don't address the vacant and frozen in my presentation. It is in the front section of the big book under the position. It is marked there, frozen positions for you, and I'm not sure if any of my staff knows.
Okay. Well,
It is showing in the salaries that they are funded at a 6-month basis.
Okay.
okay.
At 6 months?
Yes,
Okay.
January.
Okay, okay, all right. Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
ma'am. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. Next slide.
Ms. Catherine?
Yes, ma'am.
I had one question I wrote down. So taking in consideration these positions, would that keep the manager's recommended budget to roughly about, say, 85, 86% still on the salaries?
Are you talking about funding percentage?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought the funding percentage for police was like 90-something%. Do you recall?
I mean, that's still got frozen positions.
Right, I want to say, I don't have that, Councilwoman Weeks, but I can get you that information, because I did calculate the funding rate for fire and for police. In the back of my mind, I want to say it was like in the 90-some%. Fire was a tad higher than police department was, but I can get you that number, so just make a note on that, guys, if you don't mind. Okay? All right, so let's see, next slide. And then we're going to go to salary and benefit costs. So again, you know, you keep hearing me say 42 million salary and benefits, and the reason I keep repeating is because it is such an important number. So this slide goes into more detail about what makes up that 42 million. So what we've done is we've broken the salary and the benefit costs down on the left-hand side. Salaries, of course, being top line because that's the most expensive thing. And then we list the benefit costs below that. Each column represents the fund. So you've got the general fund, utility fund, stormwater, occupancy tax, and the far right column is your total. So the big thing for me, because like I said, this is the biggest thing driving our budget, is that 27 million at the top, far right of salary costs. That's what we pay people per hour, okay? That represents about 66% of the total $42 million budget. And in that same line item, talking about the general fund, 23.6 million in that second column, that's 86% of the $27 million total. So that's why I'm saying, you know, the general fund is the biggest driver in this, and that's what we're trying to find money to fund. And then when you go through all of the different benefits, the total of that, so those benefit totals, not line one, but everything else, represents about 34%. So 34% of that 42 million is just the benefits. I mean, it's just such an impactful number to me because it's not, you know, people go and work out in the world and they don't have benefits, but there are a lot of benefits that the local government offers. So it is very impactful to see how much extra that costs. And we have to give it to everybody. We can't say one class gets it, another. Everybody gets the same benefit if they're a full-time employee. So the other thing I would point out to you, in the general fund column, that bottom total, 35.9 million, that is 85% of that $42 million. So again, I'm telling you, the big driver is the personnel cost in the general fund. That's 85% of the biggest driver in this budget, okay? All righty, let's go to the next slide. All right, so on this slide, we kind of give you an outline of what changes are recommended in the manager's budget. So a recommended is a 2.5% cost of living increase at about $656,000. And this is kind of, it's a net estimated number. I think when we figured the actual, it was somewhere around 850, but we had other savings in those salary line items that allowed us to net it down to about 656. So it's just a ballpark estimate for the council to understand. So what we're talking about, you know, it takes, you know, maybe 3.5 pennies just to fund the COLA. That's it. We did not recommend a 1% merit adjustment because we just couldn't justify it. That cost was around $337, which is about 1.5 pennies on the tax rate. We did not recommend a bonus, which would be, at the last we did $400 net, that was about 1 penny on the tax rate. The 401k contribution, the cost of that for the sworn and non-sworn employees is about $1.2 million. So, you know, we're talking about like 6 pennies on the tax just to pay the 401. That's the employer side. That's not what the employee decides to contribute. This is just what the city contributes on behalf of its employees. The retirement rates are going up again. They are going to continue to go up again. because the board that controls the retirement rates at the state, their actuarial studies have seen the cost going up. So when you look at the increase, we're going from fiscal '24, a total of about 3.4 million to a little over 4 million in '25. I mean, we're talking about 700,000. So, I mean, we're talking about like 3.5 cents on the tax rate just to fund the retirement contribution. I mean, it's just very impactful when you look at those totals. In health insurance, we budgeted about a 19% increase. We are really hoping that with the change to Aetna in 2025, that we're going to see either the same or a decreased premium is what our hope is. But we don't know. We got bitten with that this past year, and we had an increase. So we went ahead and budgeted in an increase to go from $675 per month to $804 per month. But we won't find that out till probably sometime in late September or early October when they open enrollment at the state health plan. Next slide.
Ms. Catherine?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't have to give me an exact number, but the ARPA grant,
Yes,
about how much did that offset salaries?
So we used all 8.34 million, we used it to offset salaries. Now, the majority of it came out of the general fund. We used like 2.5 million maybe in the utility fund, very small amount, maybe 30,000 in the occupancy tax, and then the rest of it was offset in the general fund between fiscals '22 and fiscal '23. But I can get you more specific numbers if you need those. Is that good enough?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
yes, ma'am.
And worth noting, that general fund increase that's giving us, some options, that's that. That money was basically recycled into the general fund to be able to be used without having to check some of the federal boxes. So it's still sitting there for us to be able to do things like, some of the one-off things in this budget, so that as council wants to use them.
But do we know how much is of the ARPA funds that is left over?
We'll have to look at what our general fund balance is, because
Well,
most
yeah.
of, just to be completely blunt, most of the general fund balance is that. Because the general fund balance prior to receiving those funds was abysmally low. As you go back to that slide, and you'll see it, basically the general fund was bumped back up with those.
That's true. So that estimate that I gave you from 38 to 45 to 29% on that fund balance slide, that's really where your savings are there. Because like I said, if you look at that slide that's got the fund summary and you see fiscal '23 general fund, the net is in the general fund is going to go up about $5.5 million. So a lot of that, part of that is savings, other departmental savings, but a big piece of that is the ARPA, where we reduced the expenditures and placed them in the grant fund to offset. Yeah. So that would be the end of that. So, okay. Next slide. Okay. So I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to do the priorities, and then I'll finish up.
Thank you, Catherine. Kind of back to the future here. When we had our first meeting of the new council to talk about strategic priorities, we met at the Goldsboro Event Center, and we did a few exercises, and one of them, I think you remember, was the prioritization exercise. So we feel like this budget is that was a driver for this budget, was what the city council priorities were. And what they were the two top ones were decreasing violent crimes and gang activity, and improving the town's financial position. Well, one of the challenges, as you know, that we've been experiencing here in Goldsboro has been an increase in gang activity and violent crime over the past few years while we've been losing police officers. I don't believe that's a coincidence. I think if we can get our staffing up, then we'll be able to. The chief and I are talking about how to do this. To get our crime rate back lowered again. So that's a fundamental priority of the city council. So that's one of the things that, you came in there and you made a very tough decision to raise the police salaries so that we could hopefully recruit better. And I think it's working right now. We're seeing more people applying, more people in the pipeline, less people leaving. So it's been a good thing. A couple other ones I'll just touch on. A lot of the priorities that you mentioned about we put into the budget. Some of them are more policy driven. Economic expansion and economic development, we're working on those. You talked about addressing the unhoused population needs. We're working on those as well. We'll have to use our CDBG funds and work with our partners to do that, but that's a long-term you're not going to really be able to address that completely in one budget year. An expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, we've gone ahead and we've hired our consulting engineering firm for that, and we're moving forward looking for grants. But we started the planning process for that, so that, this is a 5 to 6 year process before we can actually get a plant built and online so that we can handle future growth. And also removal of slum and blight, and that's one of the reasons why you see the 2 positions there that I've recommended, was simply because we have, and that also relates to the crime, we have a lot of houses and other places that we need to concentrate on and remove, and we can hopefully use CDBG money for a lot of that, but that is what we're working on. Then in the February retreat, we kind of emphasized what it would take to make the salaries on the police department whole, and then you kind of, in March, you voted to improve those salaries. And so that kind of sets the stage for, that's kind of what the whole driver of the whole budget has been public safety, because once you take those actual and proposed pay increases in place, then it's pretty much kind of, that's about as far as we can go from our perspective. Any questions for me on that? I believe it reflects what you were asking us to do. And we're still working on a lot of the other kind of things like vacation buyback and things like that. Those are more policy issues. They're not impacting the budget as much as those 2 big ones were. So.
Thank you. And I wanted to point out, Terry pulled the page out of the budget, the big book. It's on page 64, and it's position benefit summary. And in the lower corner here, you'll see frozen positions. And the police at 20 FTEs frozen, it's approximately funded at about 90%. Fire has 3 frozen, and they're funded at about 96%. Planning has 1 frozen, and they're funded at 94%. Streets has 1 frozen, funded to about 93%. So we have a total of about 25 positions in the general fund that are frozen and not funded or partially funded, which that saves the city about $1.3 million. So, I mean, we're talking about 6.5, 7 pennies on the tax rate we were able to save by not funding those positions. But again, there's consequences to not funding, right? So I just wanted to point that out. It was page 64 in the big book, if you want to mark that.
Can I ask a question, Mayor?
Yes, please.
So the three positions that I asked about earlier that were frozen for the fire department, are they still frozen in this recommended budget or not?
Partially. So they're frozen, but they're only frozen for half a year.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's that's why I caveat. So, and on that slide, that page 64, if you see, it's double asterisk fire. 3 positions are frozen for approximately 50% of fiscal 25.
Okay, I understand now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir. Okay, I promise we don't have a whole lot more to go. I'm going to try to wind this up for you. So next, on the departmental expenditures. So we're not going to go in detail through all of these sheets. Each little bullet provided as far as each organizational department, what priorities were, the big expenditures, that is for just a summary, light reading for y'all, in the evening if you want to. So the one thing I will point out to you on this summary page, the top 2, police and fire, because these were ranked in order of amount of expenditures, those are both obviously public safety. If you scroll further down that list, the 4th from the bottom, inspections, it is also considered public safety. So it makes up about $24.4 million of the general fund budget, okay? And so this slide, actually 2 slides, because it took 2 to get all the departments on in the general fund, it lists every department, and it gives you the fiscal 24 adopted budget. The next column is your manager recommended, and then there's a percent change, and then there's a dollar change in the final column, so you can see plus up or plus down for that. And again, if you have questions, it doesn't have to be tonight, but if you have questions that you can pass along to the manager and you want us to do some more research or explain some more, we are more than happy to do so. And then on the second slide, basically, I just want to point out to you is that in that second column, manager recommended, that's that $55.9 million in the general fund total expenditures that we've been talking about this whole evening. And then I wanted to point out, let's see. Okay, so on slides, slides 49 through 65 in this book cover the general fund, the stormwater fund, and the utility fund. Slides 66 through 68 deal with downtown development, occupancy tax, both their expenses and revenues, and I'm not going to go through those in detail. That is for you to read. And also, too, I will say downtown development occupancy tax fund did not have material changes in them. They're about the same as they were. So we're going to actually go down to slide 70, which starts capital outlay. So we're going to skip ahead. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this table is kind of a bird's eye view of the capital outlay. So again, we've been through salary and benefits, we've been through operational, we've been through debt, and now we're going to talk a little bit about capital. So the departments requested about $18.5 million. That's the first numerical column you see beyond the description. And the manager cut to roughly $5 million in actual approved capital that he is presenting to you. That was a $9 million cut. These are current needs. These needs, this $18.5 million, does not reflect either major building construction, reconstruction, renovation, or infrastructure needs. These are just current problems that the departments are trying to deal with. The far right columns deal with what was the request and the adopted for fiscal '24, just to give you some perspective about the totals. You know, like I said, we had $18.5 million in asks. 9.4 was approved. Last year, we had 11.8 million in ask, and about 4 million was approved. Okay, and we also, show it by fund as well in the type. So next slide. So the pages that follow here are the detailed requests by the department and by the fund. It starts out with the general fund and then goes through each department and their capital outlay request. In the first numerical column, that is their budget request. That's what the department had asked for. And then the last column, recommended, is what the manager actually approved. We're actually going to skip over to slide number 78, which is the last page of these detailed slides. So it goes general fund, stormwater fund, utility fund, and so forth. And this is actually the total page. And what I want to point out to the council is that, the original recommended borrowed amount out of that $18 million was only $5.9 million, okay? The actual, when it came down to what the manager recommended, we only recommended financing $2.4 million. So out of $9.5 million in manager recommended capital, we're only going to debt fund $2.4 million. The rest of it, the city is paying. And I will say the majority of that is coming out of the utility fund because it is required utility improvements that have to be made. And like I said, all of that detail as to what it is included not only here in your slides, but also in detail in your books and within the departmental's request as well. Next slide. And then this slide summarizes it, all the funds together, but by the type. And I guess the thing I guess the big takeaway for me in this is that, we had $18.5 million in requests, $9.4 million in manager recommended. And in buildings and improvements, recommended was $545,000. That's about 6% of the $9.5 million. Rolling stock was about $1.5 million, which is about 16% of the total. Vehicles, set $1.8 million roughly. That's about 20%. The distribution system, that's about $5.6 million. That is all utility fund. So that is 59% of that, which is why when we talk about why did we have to use fund balance, why did we have to have rate increases, we have to fund that because it's not debt funded. You know, it's very difficult to get debt funding on stuff in the dirt, right? You know, buildings you can do, fire trucks and cars and things like that. So I just wanted to point that out, that's how that breakdown of the 9.5 million. And again, I'm going to remind the council that there is a comprehensive CIP that the manager is spearheading that's coming in the late summer or fall of 2024, where you will address really big needs for the city as far as buildings, improvements, and infrastructure. So, and then last slide for me anyway. So I'm just going to announce so the public is aware there is a public hearing on the budget specifically scheduled for Monday, June 3rd at 7 p.m. in the council chambers. According to general statute, notification of the publication of the budget and the budget public hearing was advertised in the Goldsboro News Argus on Saturday, May 11th, 2024. Notification was sent to the large industrial customers regarding the proposed rate change on May the 7th, as required by the contract we have with those customers. I would ask that the council please discuss scheduling any additional budget work sessions in terms of date, time, and location, and I would also add subject matter, because that will allow your staff to try to properly prepare for you and be ready for that meeting. We, the manager and I have talked about, we would like to recommend adoption of the 24-25 budget at the June 17th meeting. And the reason that I say that, there is a significant amount of work that goes into preparing the budget ordinance. So if whatever changes the council makes between June 3rd and June 17th, you have to realize what your deadlines are to submit things are for the staff, how long it takes me to get these things done, and I'm condensing an $86 million budget into about 5 pages, and I have to make sure it's right, because if it's not right, we have a big problem come July 1. So I just would ask that consideration of the time that it takes to prepare. If possible, we would like to adopt on the 17th, but the council has the pleasure to do that up till June 30th at midnight. And so with that, I think I'm done. I'm going to turn it over to the manager for final comments, and he can wrap it up. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Catherine. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Catherine and her finance team for the excellent work that they have done in putting this together and throughout the budget process, and also the department heads. It's been difficult, and I know they've kicked and screamed at me quite a bit for some of the things I felt like we had to do, but they understand the urgency, and I understand their urgent needs, but I'd just like to thank them all for working together. And I know we still have a lot of work left to do here, but just wanted to shout out to the staff and Catherine and her team for everything they've done so far. Any questions?
Council, any questions for Ms. Gwynn or Mr. Livingston? It's been a long conversation. This, again, is not the final time that we'll be able to ask questions in private or in public. And there's no pressure on any questions right now because it's a lot to digest. Council, any comments or questions right now?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
So the presentation for tonight, we can reserve our comments and deeper questions for the next session that we're gonna have. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can ask stuff now, because ultimately, city manager and our finance director have to take our feedback and go back into making any sorts of adjustments as they see, if there's things that they see that can fit within individual requests and needs. So there's nothing stopping you from saying something now, you or anyone else for that matter, saying something now and later. This is our show to run.
So I think I can reserve a lot of my comments for later so we can discuss, but the biggest disappointment in the budget was the missing fire truck. And I really would like to see how we can figure that out and how to get a fire truck. I think it's a necessity, and when we talk about public safety, I think we need to figure it out, and I think we need to figure it out this year. I don't want to wait, because what I'm aware of is the cost is just going to keep going up. So I'm aware that there was a request for 2 trucks, and then it went down to 1 truck, and that 1 truck is not in the recommended budget. So I would like to see how we can figure out how to make that happen for our firefighters.
Hey, along. Along
Councilman.
those same lines with the fire truck, I know I talked to Chief, before, and Chief said there was a difference between a custom bill and a quick bill, right?
Yes.
Could you explain the difference in, probably the difference in price? Or was the price the quick bill that you gave in the budget?
Yes, so the difference is one of them, we have no say, or we have very limited say on what's on the truck, how it's built. Spec build, we do that. And prior to about 2 months ago, there's about $150,000 difference. That has now minimized and gone down to about $100,000 difference. And we're having issues with motors, the motors that we use due to federal guidelines on emissions. Those motors are gonna be harder to come by. When they do come and they are built, we're being told that the estimate cost is gonna increase about $100,000 on top of the build of the truck due to new emissions. So a lot of it's going into it. The biggest difference on us between a quick build and a spec build is how much we can do to it when it's in line. Kind of like your car.
Right, so if we could work some kind of way to get a fire truck and we got to the price of a quick bill, would that suffice? Would that be?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the one that was in there, the last one left in there, was an actual quick build.
Okay.
And it's the same thing that I presented during the retreat.
Okay.
Catherine's got a question, go ahead.
So what I would say to the fire truck, so fire truck really, if this council decides that needs to be a priority and you agree to it as a consensus, it's not even going to come into the actual operating budget, okay? It's going to be in a capital project budget like we did the other one because it's debt funded, and the debt, the financial company is going to say it needs to be set aside so we can account for it. So what I would do is the project fund we have for a fire truck right now, there would be a second line to add fire truck number 2, and it's really, that has nothing to do with the annual operating. So if this council sees fit, if you just give Chief Stampian and myself and the manager some direction, we can agree and we can bring back an amendment so that they can go ahead and order it, because we know that the audits are getting ready to be caught up within the next few weeks. And again, as I said, when the audits are caught up, the council's not ready yet to set up a CIP, but we're ready to go out for debt. So even though being on the UAL, we can still go to the local government commission and ask for permission to borrow X. If X is 500,000 or 2 million, it doesn't matter. We have everything caught up, and we are prepared, and we've got good financial reserves, good fund balance, that we can make all of that happen. And I think the LGC would look favorably upon us and approve such debt. So doing that, if that's the will of the council and the manager, we can definitely make that happen very quickly. Okay? So I just want to make sure I explained that about the project.
Is there anyone on council that would object to going ahead and getting something in front of us to be able to approve as part of this budget? Or do you want to do it as part of this budget, or do you want to do it separate?
It's actually going to be a capital project amendment.
Okay,
is what it's
to
gonna
current
be.
year or next year budget?
I can do it at the next meeting, time
Okay.
allowing, you know. I would
Okay.
just need to know from the chief, what dollar amount do I need to put in there? I mean, do you know what that is, chief?
Y'all work that out.
Okay.
If there's no objection from council, again, I feel comfortable with, I see the work that has been going on with getting our audits caught up to where that we're going to be in a position to do that. I want to actually get across that line. I feel like that's very, very important. But, man, if no one on council strongly objects, then I'll ask that you go ahead and bring that in the second meeting.
I had thought that's what we had discussed at our last work session, that we were gonna make at least one vehicle a priority, is what I thought we had wrote down on apparatus. When you were, because I remember specifically asking you if we could go ahead and lock down in a price, even though the vehicle had to be,
And as far as
built or whatever.
locking down the price would be difficult with them, because from the time we went from council retreat to about 2 months, they already had a 4.1% increase in cab and chassis prices. So I couldn't lock one down. I do have one as of March that they gave me on a quick build right here, $894,450. And that's a quick build with certain modifications that we are allowed to do. But that was as of March. Now, price changes due to the motors, I'd have to reach out to the vendor to see.
Chief, are any of the quick bills that you're seeing come across your desk, demo trucks or show trucks, or are all of them like in-process trucks?
The quick builds are typically, you order them and then they throw them in line, and it's quick,
Right.
easy, and fast. There are demo trucks occasionally that come out, but with the prices that everybody's seeing, when a vendor gets a demo, a lot of times,
It's
They're
gone
gone.
before the show's over? Okay.
but I can certainly reach out to them and see if they've got one.
Yeah, might as well.
Yes, sir.
All right. And Catherine, if you'll bring that back to us, the first meeting in June is gonna be busy. Council, any other comments or questions on the budget?
Just a quick comment.
Go right ahead.
A couple of things, just to say to Matt and Catherine and everybody else involved publicly. I really appreciate being able to have the tax administrator at the retreat this year. That was a huge help to understand some of that and be able to ask some questions, and I appreciate whoever was responsible for having Santec come and speak to us as well. 'Cause as a new council member, hearing from those two folks really helped me get my arms around some stuff and decisions that we have to make. And I do recall, as Councilwoman Weeks pointed out, that we did have that discussion about trying to figure out, and as the Pro Tem mentioned, trying to figure out, go ahead and get one apparatus somehow or another taken care of. I understand that, once we can get off this unit assistance list, that our CIP can move forward. But I do feel like that apparatus is sort of like an emergency situation at this point, to be able to figure out how to make that happen. I certainly agree with that.
Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I have one more question. We have been talking about street pavement and the status of our streets. But it seems like in the recommended budget, the streets that were on that list fell in either District 3 or District 4. And it kind of seems like that has been an ongoing thing where those streets are kind of getting pushed to the side. So we agreed, well, the previous council agreed that we would forego paving for that particular time to give our employees the well-deserved raise that they needed, but that we would talk about it again. And it seems like this budget, that was 3 years ago. And now we are again pushing back street pavement, which is only gonna make it worse. So if we can't fully fund the project, how much money can we put towards the project? And I also don't wanna see our streets on the south end just getting overlooked and neglected either.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. We can look in a little bit more detail on that, drill down on that some. Our big goal for the coming year is to develop that, the coming months actually, to develop that CIP in anticipation of getting off the UAL list and also coming up with programs where we are doing bonds again.
Okay.
But we do prioritize our streets and we base it on, which the condition, the pavement condition.
Okay, City Manager, real quick, do you think you could give us like a preview of what some of your ideas for those projects are? Because it may be something that can wait, that we can work towards.
Yeah.
And we don't have to talk about it in this particular budget, but I do want to make sure that those street pavements are on everybody's radar, that we can try to work towards that.
Yes, ma'am, we can, because we've been working on that, and engineering's been working on that. Our hands are a little tied right now, and we've been preferred to be putting in that money for on bonds, but once
Okay.
we get the ability to do those things, we can, and I think that's gonna go a long ways, because we don't want to just do a little bit at a time. We need
Okay,
larger scale projects where we could bid it out and get economies of scale.
okay.
We'll have engineering do a report on the street paving, though.
That'd be great. Council, any other comments or questions? Ms. Taylor?
Just that, we're gonna be able to go into detail about things at future meetings, right?
Well, it's a wonderful segue. So, y'all check your calendars and take a look and see. This is a date that was floated, was May 29th. this is not a hard and fast thing. We will actually set a meeting as we have some more time to converse and check everyone's schedules, but see if that 29th works, and if so, no? Okay. So, we'll reach out to everyone on council. It's exceedingly difficult, because all of us are active and engaged and professionals, and so it's exceedingly difficult to try and pull together a special called meeting, but we'll do it. So, expect an email from Ms. Getz with a couple of different options. I mean, we'll figure something out to be able to get a time. Ms.
Would
Taylor?
it be easier maybe if we, all just wrote down some dates that we have available and see if there's any dates that all of them, that are matching up? Because the way that it's been working is like, there's always someone's always got a prior engagement.
We'll have that conversation outside. I don't want to hold us up as we're
Okay.
trying to get ready for it. But bottom line is, we're going to have to set another meeting to actually be able to have more detail, and also, get more feedback now that we've had time to digest this.
Okay.
Councilman
I
Boyd?
have the 29th already in my calendar, so that's a no-go for the 29th after the regionalization meeting.
You said that was a no-go for you?
Okay.
Okay. All right, like I said, that one was one that was floated. I'm gonna offer my quick comments on budget, and then we'll get back to scheduling. Come here.
Is it okay if maybe all of us sent Laura just a few dates upcoming, and then Laura can choose the comments so she doesn't have to call and text and all this?
We even, look, at one point we were tossing around the idea of doing a doodle poll, just trying to get something out there so that we could, get something scheduled.
Would you prefer a doodle or us just sending
If
you?
y'all could send me your dates, that'd be great.
Okay.
Well, let's set some parameters. Let's do this outside here. We'll set some parameters between this date and this date. Who's available? We'll figure something out here. Let's don't eat up time right here. My comments on the budget, first of all, it's an incredible amount of work has gone into this, and as our interim city manager, Mr. Livingston, already noted, this is only the second time in your career that you've recommended a property tax increase, and the other one was due to a statutory change where the business registrations
Yeah,
went away.
privilege
and
license, they took that away back, I don't know, 2016 or something like that.
So this is, I'll speak from what I've watched. This is weighed very heavily on you, and because this is abnormal. This is a big number that I don't think anyone is happy about. And I don't know that it's what the final number is going to be. I'm not necessarily committing to that either. I'm just saying that the amount of work pulling this together and being bold enough to put something like this out there is not lost on me, and I appreciate that. First of all, we touched on utility rates. I do want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make adjustments within the contracted rates, to make sure that the rates are as equitable as possible across all of the corporate, the industrial, as well as residential components of our city and the different ratepayer sheets. And I really do want to take a deeper look at that. I'm hoping that there might be a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more fruit on that tree, if you will. Next, we made some, I think, really good decisions during the pandemic, and when ARP with ARPA funds and things like that coming in. One option was to be able to use those funds to cover first responder salaries, and then on the back end, grow your general fund so that then you could use them for things as you saw fit in the future. Again, within the same spirit. I think that was a good decision for us. I think it allowed us some flexibility, and I think we're in a position where we need to use some of that flexibility. I certainly do not want to see us use our general fund inappropriately. I do not want to see us use it for general salaries. But if there are things that are in our budget, in our capital request summary, that would fit within the spirit of those things, that we could fund with some of that in this year, and then be able to, it'll reduce our general fund some, but it's a one-time expense, and it's within the spirit of what the funds were originally delivered for. So I would be willing to put my name beside making that risky but calculated decision. As we go into next year's budget, not to overcomplicate things, but as was already discussed, next year is a reevaluation year. It's going to be, in addition to the conversation about what our rate is, there's also the conversation about what values will be. So next year is going to be an exceedingly difficult year to do math, but we will get it. And of course, the county will be playing a large role in that. But I want to kind of phase into this a little bit. This is a big amount, and as much as I absolutely understand the economics around our effective rates, I absolutely understand that concept. The simple reality is it's still more money coming out of taxpayers' pockets. It's still more money coming out of the individual wallets and checking accounts. And so that's not lost on me. So while I think that overall this is a very reasonable budget, getting there is going to be an expensive endeavor for a lot of our citizens, even though when you look at that monthly amount, you're looking at, $11, $15 or less. When you look at that annual amount for a $100,000 house, what was it? $100 or 150? I'm on page 79. I'm not on the page I need to be on, so this is just distracting me right now. I'll go from memory instead. So if you're looking at one of the higher end houses in the city, a $300,000 house, you're looking at $450 over the course of the year. But that compared against the challenges that we're trying to address with this budget, with policing, with fire, with inspections, with code enforcement, it's a bold move, and I respect the team for being willing to put this out there. And now we've got to figure out what the right way to balance this thing and get something across the line is. And Catherine, one more time, you mentioned earlier, or Miss Gwen, I apologize. One more time, you mentioned that the state of our audit for last fiscal year. You mentioned that within the coming weeks, we've received the letter about the potential for sales tax withholding. To me, that is a moot point because we've already set a plan in place that will be turned in. Can you talk just very briefly about where we are on that and when you anticipate having that particular audit across the line submitted to the state?
So in our last status call last weekend, we were told that we expected to have the draft of the financial statements this week. And so that takes me a couple of days to get through to return back to them. So we're hoping that either the first meeting in June or the second meeting in June, we're actually presenting the actual audit to the city council. So, we have stayed. If they've asked me for something, they have gotten it back and vice versa. So we've been in good communication. As far as the appeal, we were required by statute to reply to the LGC on a website form to appeal, which I did appeal with a letter signed by the manager stating that the reason we're appealing is we expect to have the audit submitted by June 30th. So that was done, like I said, sometime Friday morning. I got that handled. Yeah.
And that piece of it, again, if we don't go past, is it July?
June 30th.
If we don't get past June 30th, it's a moot point anyway, and there's
That's
nothing to
correct.
appeal. But I respect you,
Yes, sir.
publicly taking that step.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So those are my comments on budget, where we are, my humble opinion on things. Council, I appreciate everyone else's feedback and attention. With that, I'm going to recess this until 7 o'clock in council chambers.
Let us pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you for this moment that we can come together with the meeting of the minds. Whether it's community, whether it's staff, Father, we thank you for these elected officials that have come today even to do the bidding of the city. We thank you for them. Father, give them wisdom tonight. Give them honor where they will know that they're appreciated even in a time like this, God. Father, we thank you in advance for what you're getting ready to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Getz, if you would please conduct a roll call.
Mayor Gaylor,
Present.
Councilman Boyette,
Present.
Councilwoman Taylor,
Present.
Councilwoman Weeks,
Present.
Councilman White.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Matthews will be joining us momentarily, so when she gets here, obviously, her vote will be counted. And Councilwoman Jones is unable to be here this evening. She has a personal matter. And for the record, Mayor Pro Tem Matthews is present now. All right. So with that, we'll move directly into presentations. We're going to start off celebrating our Goldsboro Youth Council seniors. Ms. Williams.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to come to you again to present our graduating members of the Goldsboro Mayor's Youth Council for this year. We do have 7 graduates representing 3 of our Wayne County schools. Have 4 graduates from Eastern Wayne High School, 1 from Charles B. Aycock, and 2 from Wayne Christian. So I'd like to call them up each one at a time. I'll share a little information, and then Mayor asked that their families will come up and you will come down and take a picture. So Miss Amaya Artis is not here. She is the Eastern Wayne High School graduate. Okay, I'd like to call up Ethan Carlisle. Ethan is a graduate of Charles B. Aycock High School. He has been a GYC member for 1 year. Ethan graduated as salutatorian for Charles B. Aycock, summa cum laude, and as an NC academic scholar. Ethan was a member of the National Honor Society. He was also team captain of the Charles B. Aycock men's tennis team. They finished the season as conference tournament champions, second in the region, the top 8 in the state for 3A, and Ethan received the Conference Player of the Year award. Ethan attends the lovely First Church, and he plans to attend Methodist University and major in engineering, as well as play for the men's tennis team at Methodist. Congratulations, Ethan. We'd like for your family to come up and join us.
Y'all come right over in here and get in the middle where you
Can they take a picture with our phone, or will they send it to
Oh,
them?
yeah.
It'll be on.
Yeah, we'll have the next sheet.
Awesome.
And then you can have the roll file too, not just the upload. There you go.
That's correct. Great, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Ethan, some words, please.
I'm just thankful for this experience and getting able to understand my local community better.
Okay, next I'd like to call up Chandler Duvall. Chandler is a graduate of Wayne Christian School. He's been a GYC member for 2 years. He served as his class's co-salutatorian. He participated in track and field. He was a member of the National Honor Society. He received the Phi Theta Kappa Society Award from Wayne Community College. Chandler plans to attend the University of Mount Olive and major in biomedical sciences. He has been accepted into UMO's honor program. He will enter as a sophomore due to college credits received in high school. Chandler is interested in a career in dentistry, and he serves on the media team at the Glorious First Church. Congratulations, Chandler. I'd like for your family to come.
It's a really big honor to be recognized, so I just want to say thank you.
Okay, last who's here, but certainly not least, I'd like to call up Mr. Oliver Thomas. Oliver is a graduate of Wayne Christian School. He's been a GYC member for 3 years. Oliver played football, basketball, and ran track. He served as Wayne Christian student body president. He also was president of Wayne Christian School's National Honor Society. Oliver attended and completed the Wayne County Chamber of Commerce's Junior Leadership Program. He served as huddle leader in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And Oliver plans to attend Liberty University and major in biomedical sciences, and he is interested in a career in medicine. Congratulations, Oliver.
I would like to say thank you. This is my 3rd year doing it. I'd like to say thank you to Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Sykes for all the work that y'all have put in. I really appreciate it. And I made good friends and great memories in my time with the Goldsboro Mayor Youth Council. So thank you very much.
And Mayor, before I turn it over, I'll say we are wrapping up this year's Youth Council session. Next month will be our last meeting. We'd love to have you drop in, Mayor, if you can, just to say a final goodbye. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you, families and parents, for allowing us to spend the time with your kids that you have, for letting them be a part of the program. So thank you so much.
Wonderful job. Thank you so much, Ms. Williams, Ms. Sykes, for what you do, and to the families and participants. You know, it's intended to be an opportunity for folks to meet other people who are high performers. And you notice there's some common denominators. Athletes, clubs, civic engagement, even in high school. Going off to phenomenal institutions with majors that are hard. Biomed, engineering. One person even going and looking to be a college athlete. It's hard. The common denominator here is that it is hard, and they've done it, and they've excelled. I wish you the best of luck. I wish you success. I hope that you come back to Goldsboro at some point. I left for about a decade before I came back. That's okay. Go ahead, go do something else for a little while, then come back and bring those talents right back home and help make this a better place. So congratulations, thank you. And I appreciate you inviting me this time. Usually Felicia is very polite in telling me that I'm a distraction, which is not wrong. And so I look forward to being there next time. Thank you.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have, Ms. Getz, if you would please, we have a resolution expressing appreciation for services rendered by Joy Newell as an employee of the City of Goldsboro for more than 16 years. Joy and supervisor and any family would come forward. Just, sir. You want me to just read it, or do you want someone else to read it? Is there anyone specific in the room that you would like? Okay. It is an offer. Resolution 2024, number 66. A resolution expressing appreciation for services rendered by Joy Newell as an employee of the City of Goldsboro for more than 16 years. Whereas Joy Newell retires on May 31st, 2024 as a customer service supervisor with more than 16 years of service with the Finance and Revenue Department. And whereas Joy began her career on December 27th, 2007 as a collections specialist with the Finance and Revenue Department. And whereas on January 8th, 2014, Joy was reclassified to customer service representative within the Finance and Revenue Department. And whereas beginning April 7th, 2016, Joy served as interim customer service supervisor with the Finance and Revenue Department. And whereas on October 24th, 2016, Joy was promoted to customer service supervisor with the Finance and Revenue Department, where she has served until her retirement. And whereas Joy has proven herself to be a dedicated and efficient public servant who has gained the admiration and respect of her fellow workers and the citizens of the City of Goldsboro. And whereas the mayor and city council of the City of Goldsboro are desirous on behalf of themselves, city employees, and the citizens of the City of Goldsboro of expressing to Joy Newell their deep appreciation and gratitude for the services rendered by her to the city over the years. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and city council of the City of Goldsboro, North Carolina, that we express to Joy Newell our very best wishes for success, happiness, prosperity, and good health in her future endeavors. This resolution shall be incorporated into the official minutes of the City of Goldsboro and shall be in full force and effect from and after this, the 20th day of May, 2024. Would you like to introduce your family? All right.
Would you like to say something? Oh, okay. So I've worked with Joy for a little over 5 years now, and I would say that she has always been a welcoming, smiling, happy person, and she's done an excellent job down in revenue collections, and she is going to be sorely missed in our department. I would say that Joy has the heart of a servant. We know that she has served the city for almost 17 years, and she has served her family, her children, and her husband of 50 years before he passed last year. So we are very sad to see her go, but at the same time, we are happy for this next chapter in her life, because it should be a time of joy and celebration as she celebrates a great-grandchild that was just born not too long ago. So we're very happy for, we all deserve that, and we hope that when we get to that point, that others will also be as happy and joyous for us as we are for Joy. And her name speaks it all. So thank you, Joy, for everything. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just
Good.
Joy, you know, I'm not gonna make you cry. We're gonna miss you. You always have a COG family. Don't ever forget that. And going forward, we will be lifting you up in prayer and hope that every day brings you something that makes you happy. Don't be a stranger.
Next on our agenda, we have another proclamation. This is for a National Travel and Tourism Week, and I'm going to read this one myself. Whereas travel is one of our most fundamental freedoms, every citizen benefits from travel and tourism. The travel and tourism industry substantially enhances our personal growth and education while promoting intercultural understanding and appreciation of Goldsboro and Wayne County's history, geography, and culture. And whereas the travel and tourism industry in Goldsboro, North Carolina, Goldsboro, Wayne County, and North Carolina is vital to our economic stability and growth and contributes substantially to Goldsboro and Wayne County's cultural and social well-being. And whereas tourism is a growing industry in Goldsboro and Wayne County, generating more than $192 million in expenditures in 2022, adding nearly $8.3 million in tax revenues to our state and local coffers. And whereas tourism is a clean industry found in all 100 counties in our state and continues to employ more than 1,200 people in Goldsboro and Wayne County. Now therefore be it resolved that the Goldsboro City Council does hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through the 25th, 2024 as National Travel and Tourism Week in Goldsboro, North Carolina in recognition of the unique significance of the travel and tourism industry in the lives of the citizens of Goldsboro, Wayne County, and call upon the people of Goldsboro, Wayne County to observe this week with appropriate ceremonies and activities. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and affixed the seal of the city of Goldsboro this the 20th day of May 2024. And I believe we have Ms. Justice, if you would. Before we hand this, would you introduce yourself and talk about anything that y'all have coming up over the next few weeks?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Justice, and I'm the director for our Travel and Tourism Department for the City of Goldsboro and Wayne County. And basically, our job is to promote Goldsboro, Wayne County to visitors, to attract them to come in and spend money in our restaurant shops, go to Paramount, go downtown, visit the farms. And so we do that in several different ways.
And your offices are relocating, right? Can you talk just a little bit about that and what you expect to be able to do there and what citizens should expect in that office?
So it was approved, thanks to council, for us to relocate to 119 North Center Street, which is going to be downtown. We're going to be situated behind the picket fence, and we're going to have a really cool alleyway that we're really excited about, maybe doing a mural, putting some bistro tables, but it will be open to the visitors to come in and get visitor information about Goldsboro, Wayne County, and also to buy merchandise.
For those needing a sweatshirt or a hoodie or a t-shirt or maybe some socks, hopefully we can get some Goldsboro or Wayne
Totally
County.
fly socks.
Yeah, totally fly socks, exactly. So, if you would.
Okay. Maybe like skinny. Thank you.
Council, I need to back up one step. For proclamations, They are by right of my office. But for resolutions, they are the power of the council, not by right of the office of the mayor. And so therefore, a resolution requires a vote of council. And so I'm asking for a motion from council to approve the resolution expressing appreciation for services rendered by Mrs. Joy Newell at this time.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All right, motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, motion has been made and seconded to approve the resolution as read and presented. Is there any further conversation? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you again, Ms. Newell. I apologize for that procedural misstep on my part. All right, now moving to item D under presentations. Ms. Williams, you are back up.
Thank you, Mayor. So the presentation I have tonight is for information only, and there is no action requested of council on this evening. So I was asked to come back with a Plan B proposal for the city's home ARP homelessness grant funding. And so the department and myself went through each of the additional eligible activities, and I'm here to present what we feel will be most feasible within our capacity to administer. So we looked at nonprofit operating and capacity building assistance. I'm not going to read through, I'm just going to talk through, but we know that there are a few vetted nonprofit agencies in our community who are currently serving the homeless populations. That would be one of the qualifications for providing operating assistance and capacity building for a nonprofit. And just one thing, one of the eligible costs would be salaries for new hires, employee training and staff development. For capacity building under operating costs, we could cover rent for an office, utilities, etc. You have the list here. And then the way ahead for the department would be to have one-on-one meetings with each provider, each potential nonprofit agency, and then determine how much funding we want to set aside. But HUD allows 5%. We can do an additional 5% for capacity building. They allow up to 5% of the grant for operating expenses, and then we can do an additional 5% for capacity building. So for a total of 10% for non-profit operating and capacity building. So that's one. And then we kept supportive services on the table, which is a very important activity, and certainly you can't talk about homelessness without talking about supportive services. Some people refer to those as wraparound services. And then those have been identified several times. They're here again for you. But our way ahead, we talked about which local agencies are already providing some of these services. And as you can see, Wayne Community College, they're already providing basic education skills and cost of improving knowledge, along with a variety of other supportive services that could benefit the homeless population. And we have not made contact with these agencies. We've just just talking it all out, identifying who could possibly be eligible. We have talked about Tommy's Foundation and 4-Day Movement, who are already providing homelessness outreach services. For substance abuse treatment, I've had a few meetings and communications with Dr. Corey Richardson of Integrated Care of Greater Hickory. They are currently serving Wayne County substance abuse. And then financial assistance, cost, rental assistance, security deposit, utility deposits. Of course, the city, we can't operate any of these programs out of City Hall, so we would have to rely on our local agencies to do so, and Wages already provides those type of services. So something to consider. Again, we would sit down with agencies, potential agencies. So one thing to keep in mind, due to our limited capacity, we do have to monitor each organization. Whether we're doing nonprofit, capacity building, operating assistance, or supportive services, the department is responsible for monitoring each agency. So we don't want 20 agencies to have to monitor on top of the ones we already have currently. So I just wanted to leave those things with you. The other activities, we did ponder over, consider. We've already entertained non-congregate shelter. We know and have identified what our challenges were with that. Tenant-based rental assistance, we would like to do that maybe in the future when we have more capacity, because rent assistance, we do get a lot of requests for that. And then rental housing, again, will call for the construction of housing, which we know we don't have enough funding for that. Any questions?
I do have a question. I was reading your presentation this weekend, on the nonprofits, are they required to have an annual audit?
Yes, ma'am, I was prepared for that. I did follow up from the retreat on that in the email. Wasn't sure if it had gotten to you, but according to the HUD federal regulation, an agency that expends more than $750,000, and we would have to have financial records, and if they show that they have expended more than $750,000 in a fiscal year, then we would require that audit.
But if they haven't expended, because I was looking at, the regulations for that, if they haven't expended $750,000 within that fiscal year, we as a council wouldn't require any kind of audit from them?
We wouldn't. In the past, the city manager has signed a document waiving that. And then we would say, and then we received the recommendation from HUD to create a document that shows that we reviewed the financial record and whether or not a single audit is required or not.
Okay.
And then we would have that supporting financial documentation in the file.
Would you at least require them to have a 501c3, and I
Yeah,
guess
they
they
would have
show
to
us
have
that,
that,
and their
yes.
state solicitation license, correct?
Yes, they would have to have that, regardless of the funding, the activity across the board with all of our HUD grants.
Council, any other comments or questions on the Home ARP Plan B proposal?
If not, we'll return with some dollar amounts to go with those two activities, and we'll just take it from there. Try to do that next month.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll move to item E under ceremonial documents, and this is a proclamation that does not require a vote. I'm going to read this one myself as well. This is a proclamation showing appreciation for the heroic efforts of Seymour Johnson Air Force Base's 335th Fighter Squadron. Whereas since the 1960s, the United States government and military have been strong supporters of Israel, and whereas the United States military has played a key role in holding off hostility from countries bringing harm to Israel, and whereas Seymour Johnson Air Force Base is home to the elite 4th Fighter Wing providing F-15 air power for America and Lethal Eagles and elite airmen, and whereas in April 2024, Israel was under horrific attack from Iranian missiles and Seymour Johnson Air Force Base answered the call, and whereas 99% of the missiles launched by Iran were intercepted before striking Israel, and whereas the 335th Fighter Squadron Commander Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Murphy received a phone call from President Joe Biden commending him and his squadron for their exceptional airmanship and skill in defending Israel. And whereas according to an article in Air and Space Forces magazine, members of the Senate and House Armed Services Committee stated the success of the F-15E units, the F-15E units on April 14, 2024 show how impressively powerful and relevant these units continue to be. And whereas Congressman Don Davis stated, as a dedicated member of the U.S. House Armed Services Committee and a proud U.S. Air Force veteran, I urge the Air Force to keep all 4 squadrons at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Wayne County, including all 94 F-15E Strike Eagle aircraft, or replace them one for one with other aircraft. And whereas General C.Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the F-15E Strike Eagle is a very capable platform. And whereas General Gregory Goulier, commander of the U.S. Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, said the F-15E Strike Eagle is a phenomenal aircraft. It's in many ways unmatched air-to-ground, and in many ways it's unmatched air-to-air. So the Strike Eagle is a fantastic aircraft. And whereas General Christopher Cavalli, Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, has said that Strike Eagles figure heavily in his plans at European Command. And whereas Admiral John Aquilino, Commander of the Indo-Pacific Command, has said that there is a role for Strike Eagles in scenarios in the Indo-Pacific. And whereas we implore the United States Senate Armed Services Committee and the leaders within the Pentagon to keep the F-15E Strike Eagles at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base as a necessary and important part of our nation's military prowess. Now therefore be it resolved that the Goldsboro City Council does hereby proclaim its admiration and appreciation for the men and women of the 335th Fighter Squadron and all those stationed at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base for their heroic efforts every day, and urges the President, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Air Force to keep the F-15E Strike Eagles at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and affix the seal of the City of Goldsboro, the 20th day of May, 2024. Next, we'll move to item F. Mr. Helmer, if you would come get us started on public hearing for SU 1124.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, how are?
Good evening.
This case before you tonight is special use permit 11-24. David Ocampo, he owns a business on the east side of South Berkeley Boulevard, approximately between Ash Street and Elm Street, in a strip center located on the southeast side of the street there. Wrong way. The property is located at 112P South Berkeley Boulevard. The owner of the business, David Ocampo. Keith Hatch owns the property. This property is in a general business zoning district. The land use designation is mixed use 1. The request the applicant is requesting a special use permit to expand an existing tattoo studio into the adjacent retail space. Again, property zone general business. The use is a permitted use in the GB district. Here's a zoning map showing the retail strip center. And that's the zoning map there showing general business. The land use is mixed use 1. This is a picture of the actual the location of the building on the right. The last 2 bays on the far side of that building. The last bay is where the existing space is, and it'll be expanding into the next space there. The property has approximately 45 parking spaces, so there's adequate parking at this facility. I've been there several times and never had a problem. The site is located within the commercial strip center and contains 14 individual units. The unit currently occupied by the applicant is approximately 1,600 square feet, and this will approximately double the space he'll have to conduct business there. Again, 45 parking spaces, ample parking, so no concerns there from my staff. Therefore, planning staff is recommending approval of SU 11-24 in accordance with the finding of facts for a special use permit to allow for an existing tattoo studio to expand into the adjacent space. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council, any comments or questions for Mr. Helmer? Hearing none, we'll move into, allow you to step down for a minute, and we'll move into the public hearing. Reminder that anyone who wishes to speak, please approach the clerk and be sworn in prior to speaking. So with that, we will officially open the public hearing for SU 1124. Anyone wishing to come forward? This is a public hearing for SU 1124. Is there anyone wishing to come forward? Last and final call. This is a public hearing for SU 1124. Is there anyone wishing to come forward? Hearing none, or we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Helmer, if you'll come forward one more time. Council, in the last few seconds, if you had any other questions pop into your mind. Hearing none, Mr. Helmer, you can have a seat. And council, this as a special use hearing. Remember, there are the 4 different motions. I will ask For a motion on each individual one, I'll begin with, is there a motion that the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All right, is there a second?
I second it.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded that the use would not materially endanger the public health or safety. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. Is there a motion that the use will not substantially injure the beneficial use of adjoining or abutting property?
Motion to approve.
All right, there has been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded that the use would not substantially injure the beneficial use of adjoining or abutting property. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. Motion number 3. Is there a motion that the use will be in harmony with the existing development and uses within the area in which it is located? I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded that the use will be in harmony with existing development and uses within the area in which it is located. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. And motion 4, is there a motion that the use will be in general conformity with the City of Goldsboro Comprehensive Land Use Plan?
I make a motion.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded that the use will be in general conformity with the City of Goldsboro's Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. All 4 motions passed in the affirmative. SU 1124 passes and is approved. All right. Mr. Helmer, Ms. Getz, does that conclude SU 1124? Perfect. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to item G. This is an economic development agreement between the City of Goldsboro and the County of Wayne regarding specific properties within the Park East Industrial Park. Mr. Livingston, if you'd like to start us off, and I'll be happy to add anything.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As you said, this is an agreement between Wayne County and the City of Goldsboro, an economic development incentive package whereby the city agrees to abate 50% of the taxes, or actually share in the taxes that will be received from Wayne County, I beg your pardon there. And in exchange for that, we would not be annexing the water and sewer part of it, would still be provided as a service, and any other further economic incentive agreements we may enter into in exchange for waiving or not requiring system development fees on the property.
So this, as Mr. Livingston explained, of course, is in your packet as item G. I think this is a fascinating approach. I'm excited about doing this. It effectively creates an incentive area over in Park East that would allow a company to locate right here next to Goldsboro. They would not be annexed into the City of Goldsboro. They would, of course, be part of the County of Wayne. County of Wayne would remit half of the property taxes back to the city in return for not doing the annex, but still allowing folks to connect with water and sewer. It would allow us, with system development fees, they would still be in place, but it would allow us the opportunity to participate in any economic development incentives if we so choose for the system development fees. I think it's an aggressive move to growing our county and to growing something right here next to the city. I support this initiative. It's been a long negotiation, and I hope the council will join me in supporting this. Again, this is not something that is across the board in all property around the city. This is something that is specific to those specific parcels out in Park East, creating a specific sort of incentive zone out there. Mr. Livingston, am I summarizing this correctly?
That's correct. The only thing that I would mention in addition is they will have to pay water and sewer outside the city rates.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah, outside
but
rates.
I also think that should be included in the contract. So it's understood and we're not.
It is.
Okay, I just don't see it nowhere. It just says the city shall provide water and sewer to the properties.
Well, technically, they'll be outside the city limits, so that everything outside the city limits is charged outside the city limit rates. But we can put it in there, and I don't think there'd be anything that anybody would necessarily be
Only
opposed to.
reason, the reason I'm adamant about that is at the bottom of 10, it says this agreement represents the entire agreement of the parties, and no party may rely on any other consideration or understanding not set out in this agreement.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure.
We can add that. I'm sure there's no problem with the county adding that, just for clarification purposes.
Right.
So
with
the
that-
county's supposed to address it tomorrow morning in their meeting.
Mhm.
It says, tonight, I'm sure Angel or somebody's probably watching. County attorney will make somebody like that, but they're prepared to have the same thing added.
Okay.
Consistency.
Either way, we'll make sure that the version that is approved tonight over here with that modification does get communicated to the chairman, the county manager, and the county attorney, of course. Of course, that's assuming that it passes. So with that, item G, as explained, is there any discussion, any further comment? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agreements as modified.
Mayor, just need to open the public hearing.
Oh, we do. You're right. This is a public hearing, isn't it?
Allow anybody to speak to that.
That is why it would be under the public hearing heading. I see what she's doing here. So with that, we'll open the public hearing for item G, economic development agreement between the city of Goldsboro and the county of Wayne regarding specific properties in Park East Industrial Park. This is a public hearing. Anyone to come forward? All right. This is a public hearing for item G on the agenda, an economic development agreement between the city of Goldsboro and the county of Wayne. Anyone to come forward? All right, final call. This is a public hearing, item G on the agenda, economic development agreement between the city of Goldsboro and Wayne County regarding specific properties in the Park East Industrial Park. Seeing no one to come forward, we'll close the public hearing. Council, any other comments or questions that came up in the last few moments? All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agreement as modified. Yeah, as modified.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would make the motion to approve the item G, economic development agreement between the city of Goldsboro and the county of Wayne, along with the recommended addition of wording by Councilmember White.
All right, motion has been made. Is there a second?
I second it.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further debate on the motion to approve the agreement as presented, but with the modification as described by Councilmember White? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. I appreciate that, Council. I think that's going to be we're seeing a few other industrial parks around us, tiptoe in that direction, but I think it certainly gives us a competitive foothold in the recruitment and economic development market around us, so I appreciate that. Ms. Getz, we'll move into the public comment period. When you get seated, if you would please begin with the names that have signed in.
Just kidding.
First speaker is Caitlin Williams.
Evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Caitlin Williams. I think, as most of you probably know, I'm the owner of Small Batch Craft Market. Since I was unable to be here the last few meetings when the discussion and the vote happened, I just wanted to show up, make an appearance, and thank you all for passing the policy on street closures and special events. I really believe that letting your local businesses hold events on the streets is really an invaluable part. Anyway, I believe that keeping that option open is vital to stimulating creativity, and it adds a huge appeal to our downtown. I'd like to extend a special thanks to those of you who saw our vision for starting a new event and supported us in the name of fairness. Your advocacy for an equitable policy did not go unnoticed. I'm very hopeful that our new policy will remove the bias that seemed to affect the previous outcomes, and I look forward to using the new policy as it seems reasonable and hopefully very impartial. Thank you to those of you who responded to our emails. You offered reassuring words and offered a listening ear. We really felt like our concerns were heard. Thank you for listening to the feedback from the merchants, the vendors, and the customers, and especially those of you who came out to the events and spoke to the vendors and spoke to us. Hope you're all able to attend some of our events and see how that community of artists and creators comes together. Even if you can't support monetarily, coming out, window shopping, meeting people, it's a really great time. So I look forward to seeing Goldsboro continue to grow and to improve our city by honing in on the creativity of the people who live here and letting our ideas flourish. I hear so many positive reviews from the makers and the artists about the support that they receive in our community, and I'm excited to watch that grow with your support, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amber Long.
Hello, Council.
Hello.
I had some pictures I wanted to bring, but my printer was not working, so relying on notes. I own the loft next door. I opened it in 2016 when Center Street was still half dug up. I've expanded 3 times. I'm fixing to open my new building in about 2 weeks. And I've been in conversation for about 2 years now about how this parking would affect me. I'm not saying there's not a parking issue elsewhere, but there's never been a parking issue on our block. And now there's a big parking issue. I had the building full of employees and now I don't. But I had taken some pictures throughout the week of B&G Grill parking lot, and that's where we were suggested to park. That is not a possibility. I have one space behind my salon that I can't even get to. The dumpster people couldn't empty it for 3 weeks because they couldn't get to it until I had to keep calling and ask them to come after 3:30. So I can't even use my own parking space back there. I've even put cones and ropes and everything back there, still not able to access it. We have no handicap parking for any of our clients, and we do have some elderly clients. As far as placards go, they said I could have 5. Well, when I open next door, there'll be 20 of us. Granted, we're not all there all at the same time, but 5 is, it's not going to work. I spoke to Mr. Livingston last week, and he said that some of the city employees are having to park at John Street parking lot because y'all have too many employees and not enough spaces. But I don't know how much people John Street parking lot is going to hold. It's not. And I'm not asking for special treatment, but y'all have worked vigilantly with helping the small batch craft market since January, and I'm just asking for the same kind of help for my situation. I've reached out several times, and all I've heard is, Ms. Long, we've heard your comments and concerns. Someone will get back with you, and nobody has. So all of Center Street's not restricted. Circle Tire's not, and down at the other end's not. So until we come up with some kind of remedy for me, would it be possible to take away the 2-hour parking until something is done for me for public parking? And that's about it.
Thank you, Ms. Long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Phyllis Merritt James.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem,
Good evening.
Council. I listened attentively to the work session this evening, and I know it's budget that's coming up, and I just want to reiterate some things if people weren't listening. Fire truck, yes, make priorities get that fire truck, and I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Matthews talking about that. They also had discussion about the Herman Park Center. When you're looking at budget items, it's a nice thing to do, but not necessary if you're trying to depend on what monies need to go toward direct and funnel that money somewhere else. Look toward our safety, look toward anything else that's priority right now, because we've got several other parks and rec spaces that we can kind of utilize while we wait to be able to do that at another time. Also, listen in earnest about the synopsis presentation of the proposed budget. We heard the wonderful three-letter word tax. Again, raising the taxes on our property taxes, as well as looking at raising the water, which that was a hard dig about a year or so ago for them. You're looking at possibly up to 14% for the property tax and 7% for utility water. Again, if we can think outside the box, the same way creatively, you looked at doing something for the Park East area, perchance, we that live in the city, we pay county and city taxes. If there's some way we can look, because the county people come in the city and they benefit from a lot of things, if there's any other way that we can have a revenue stream where they can help contribute to help offset some things. Again, $15, $30 may not seem a lot to a lot of people, but that's a copay for 3 medicines that could be life-changing. It could be insulin, it could be blood pressure medicine, it could be their copay for their visit. Everybody's just not, it could be something to eat, their meal for the week, gas to get to their job. So we need to really look long and hard about any other ways that we can do. I know taxes are inevitable, but also look outside the box and really think hard, because people are suffering. And when I first moved to Goldsboro, my water bill was $25. It is now upwards of $90 to $100. Okay? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our last speaker.
All right, we'll close the public comment period. Mr. Manager, if you would please,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
consent agenda.
Yes, sir. We have amending Chapter 52, Water Regulations for the City of Goldsboro's Code of Ordinances. We have Bert Sherman here, or Richard Hamilton's going to take this one.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Good evening.
I'm here to talk to you all about making an amendment to Chapter 52 in the City of Goldsboro's Code of Ordinances. Currently, the city manager has the authority to make declarations during voluntary water restrictions when the Neuse River intake structure reaches 52 feet on the mean sea level. And he has the authority to make declarations for mandatory water restrictions when the mean sea level is at 50 feet mean sea level. We want to change that because of back in 2018, the Army Corps of Engineers, they came out and they raised the flood control structure, and they also modified the water release. The minimum water release flows from the falls down was modified as well. So right now we're thinking if we change that to 51.5 mean sea level for the voluntary water restrictions and for 7 consecutive days, and 50 feet mean sea level for 3 consecutive days for a mandatory water restriction, it will work better so that we wouldn't have to keep going out and changing, jerking around everybody as far as making changes back and forth about voluntary and mandatory water restrictions. So right now we're recommending that we make changes to those ordinances. And that's all I have.
Council, any questions? Perfect. Thank you, sir.
The next one, Mayor, is amending Chapter 53, Water and Sewer Systems of the City of Goldsboro Code of Ordinances. Essentially, this is modifying that section to reflect the Park East Economic Development Agreement that we just voted on, so that it exempts the parcels from the annexation requirement of applying for annexation upon service. So that would be Park East Lot 7, Park East Lot 9, Park East Lot 18, and the Park East identified in Wayne County PIN 351991580. Just amending our ordinances to reflect the agreement that we are working with the county, just to make sure our paperwork's correct.
This is, to be clear, that is the flip side of the same coin as the economic development agreement that we discussed earlier during the public hearing, right?
That's correct. We're just mirroring what we just agreed to.
All right. Council, any comments or questions? All right, Matt, if you would continue.
Next item is amending Chapter 72, stopping, standing, and parking of the City of Goldsboro Code of Ordinances. We have Ms. Getz that's going to present that one.
Good evening, council. So this is bringing back Chapter 72 based off of council's discussion at the last meeting. So after a review of Chapter 72, several sections needed to be updated or clarified. The proposed revisions include 72.26, removing Saturdays from timed parking restrictions, and clarifying the moving of a vehicle from the same block to the same parking space. 72.27, removing Saturdays from timed parking restrictions and clarifying the moving of a vehicle from the same block to the same parking space. Same thing with 72.28. 72.90, clarifying marking vehicles. 72.93, clarifying the appeals process, and 72.99, stating the violation for timed parking and other clerical revisions. Any questions?
And council, as was discussed, this would set a penalty for the timed parking at $25 instead of the $50 as was discussed at some point in the past, but this sets that at $25, just to be abundantly clear. And again, that was discussed, but I just want to make sure everyone saw exactly what is in front of them.
Correct.
And just for my understanding,
Yes,
when
sir.
do we go hot?
June 1st.
Right now, it's June 1st. All right, any other comments or questions on 72? Item J? All right, Matt, if you continue with item K, please.
Continuing on, amending Chapter 98. Ms. Getz, please.
So I've got a review of Chapter 98. After a review of Chapter 98, there were several issues that needed to be resolved in the ordinance to make it match the policy that was adopted by council at the last meeting, which there are numerous changes. A lot of them are clerical. There's too many for me to sit here and go over. The main thing was we changed the title to add street closings and special events. Same thing with the title for parades under 9880, parades and special events. And then the rest of them were based off the policy adopted at the last meeting. Anybody have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
Princeton, if you would.
I don't have a question, but I spoke with Councilwoman Jones, and she did have a recommendation, so I just wanted to share that, as I told her that I would. So it's looking like page 10, number 22, where it speaks to council with the reason behind the denials. I think it was just a little bit of that verbiage. She wanted to consider it reading, the city manager will issue a memo outlining the reasons for any denials. So instead of behind the denials, just kind of clean it up a little bit.
Is that in the policy or in the ordinance? I think you're in the
This is the
policy, right?
CMOP.
Policy.
That would be the policy.
Yeah, it is.
And I can share this.
If you'll do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And I'll be happy to bring back, of course, council can with a vote of 4, do anything they want to with the agenda, but I'll be happy to put that back on the agenda. You know, I wanted to get past budget. I wanted to get past June and July, but as we see that we need to tweak the special events, you know, obviously we can bring it back at council's pleasure, and I will be bringing it back so that we can do some of those technical things as well at some point in August.
Would it be okay if I just add that to the list of stuff
That'd be great.
for August?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Mr. Livingston, if you continue.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Items requiring, we'll have department monthly reports. Are any questions there under L? Seeing no questions there, Mayor, I'll move on. Item IX, items requiring individual action.
If you would, let's go ahead and vote on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor.
And then we'll roll straight into items requiring individual action. If there are any other items we need to add to items requiring individual action, we can do so. So items H through L on the consent agenda are presented for action. Worth noting, I'm sure there's someone that's going to catch this. Item M, the authorization of sale of substandard lots. This is a judgment call with me making the agenda. That is something that traditionally would have been on the consent agenda. However, we have to vote on it during the consent agenda, and then we vote on it again as part of voting on the consent agenda. And so since it requires individual action, I just make the judgment call that that sort of thing categorically, since it requires individual action, we're going to put under items requiring individual action. So there's nothing special about this specific one. That's just a categorical change that I've been making, putting as we arrange the agenda. So with that, items H through L are presented for approval. Ms. Getz, if you please conduct a roll call vote.
Need a vote?
Oh, sorry, we need a motion to approve items H through L.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda items H through L as presented by staff.
All right, thank you so much. Is there a second? All right, motion has been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda items H through L as presented. Ms. Getz, if you please conduct a roll call vote.
Mayor Gaylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Matthews?
No.
Councilman Boyette?
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Weeks?
Yes.
Councilman White?
No.
All right, motion passes a vote of 4-2. All right, moving to items requiring individual action. We'll move to item M. Ms. Glenn.
Good evening. My item tonight is authorization to sell substandard lots to adjacent property owner under Session Law 2004-94, which is Senate Bill 1370, for Beale Street to Averill Williams. Staff has received an offer to purchase on city-owned property only, deemed a substandard lot by our planning department. Council must either accept or reject the offer, and if accepted, authorize staff to execute documents to, transfer ownership. The offer is Averill Williams. The offer is $1. The bid deposit was $1. The tax value is $2,600. It is zoned R6. This is, as I said, a substandard lot is determined by our planning department. Therefore, the minimum offer is $1. The planning department has contacted all adjacent property owners to determine if any interest was there. There was none. So at this time, what we're asking is council will accept the offer, and if so, to vote on that, and then if so, vote on the resolution attached to approve staff to transfer documents to sign the deed. So.
All right, so council will do this in 2 steps. First, if it pleases the council, we will need to have a motion to accept the offer presented.
Yeah, that's it.
And just to repeat, the offer was
$1.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
So council would need a motion to approve the offer as presented. All right, motion's been made. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded to approve the offer as presented. Is there any discussion?
I do.
Yes, ma'am, please.
I do have a question for you, Ms. Catherine, if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about substandard, does that play into the conforming and non-conforming? Because if you wouldn't mind clarifying how that works, and sometimes where people have to make a different offer versus this offer being $1.
Well, I'd have to defer to my planning folks if Mark can.
And if it's a heavy
elaborate.
question, it's okay. Just if you could quickly.
So if I understand you correct, the question is, what's the difference between substandard and non-conforming versus conforming?
Or in simpler terms, what
Yeah.
makes a property $1 versus not $1?
Well, so I can't speak to the value, but property tends to be more attractive if it can meet current development standards and some of these lots are particularly small. So once you start attempting to meet the building setbacks, you end up with a lot that essentially, is not appropriately sized to put any type of structure on it other than maybe a storage building or something.
So is that, to follow on, to get to the point that I think the Pro Tem is working towards, is a substandard lot a lot that can still be built on?
It possibly, yeah. It
But it's
depends on the
gonna be-
case.
but
Yeah.
it's
So
basically-
substandard lot is one that just doesn't meet current dimensional standards for a lot in a given zoning district. So, but they're not all created equal. Some obviously are just small. Some are real small and are ultimately not really developable, you know.
So
they get too small.
that leads to, what I, again, not to put words in your mouth, but the point is that there's a lot more value to an adjacent property owner, or at least then could be put back into a larger parcel due to it being adjacent to property owner, as opposed to, you know, me buying something random on Claiborne Street. It's a non-conforming lot that I can't build on.
I would say that's a true statement, yeah. I mean, a neighbor would probably glad to have more land if it's right there and available.
Is that
Okay. So substandard, conforming are the same thing?
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
Just without it being adjoined to the property next door, you can't do anything with it. That's just kind of practical.
Yeah.
You can't build anything on it, so once the adjacent one, it gives them the advantage. I can get it, and I can add it to my lot. Now I can.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, it's gonna sit there.
For sure. Okay.
That's just a summary.
Thank you.
it also sits there as something that the city has to maintain and and deal with, which costs more than $1.
Everybody.
All right, so with that, we have, procedurally, do we have a motion to approve the offer? We did, and we had a motion and a second, and you were in the debate stage. Is there any further conversation on the motion to accept the offer as presented? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. All right, see none, motion passes. All right, so that's level 1. You look, you were going to say something.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Nope.
You want to guide us through the resolution part?
No, you can. You can handle it.
Come
Yeah,
on.
Yes, sir.
All right, so now, council, the resolution is presented also in item M. It's a resolution authorizing the sale at the aforementioned offer. And so, as presented, is there a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded to approve the resolution authorizing the sale of surplus property under Section Law 2004-94, specifically Bill Street. Is there any debate on that motion? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you. And now you'll see why. Just go ahead and pull those off the consent agenda, since you got to do a little dance around them anyways. All right. Item N, Chief West.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hey, Chief.
And item N is the Sprinkler Fund Day temporary street closure. The City of Goldsboro Downtown Development Department, in partnership with the Goldsboro Fire Department, will host their 14th annual Sprinkler Fun Day event series, providing supervised summer splash fun for all ages. As always, the Sprinkler Fun Days are free, family-friendly, and open to the public. The events will be hosted every Thursday from 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. on South Center Street from June 7th until August 16th. Goldsboro Fire Department will set up and staff the event in the northbound lane of South Center Street between Spruce and Chestnut. The Downtown Development Department is requesting the closure of the northbound lane of South Center Street from Spruce to Chestnut Street from 2:30 p.m. until 4 p.m. It's recommended by motion to grant the requested temporary street closing of the northbound lane of South Center Street from Spruce to Chestnut Street as listed or as stated above.
Council, you've heard the presentation from Chief West. Are there any questions or concerns?
I do have a concern. I
Yes,
think
Councilman.
this is a great thing. Anytime somebody say something, it jumped on. This is just to bring attention. We're going to close that from 2 o'clock to whenever Center Street Jam is closed, is done on those Thursdays that we have Center Street Jam. Just a note. Because it's every Thursday, Center Street Jam is every other Thursday, so eventually they're going to land on the same day. That's just a note.
Council, any other comments, concerns? All right. And this, as presented, is exclusively the block. This is the 300 block, which is that the hub or one past the hub?
Is that the hub?
At the hub?
Yes, sir.
All right.
The 300 block is at the
It's
hub? I
200
thought that
block.
was 200.
200 block of South Center,
Okay.
northbound lanes.
So this is,
Aaron texted me, said Sprinkler Fun Day is Friday.
So is this?
I sat right there because I figured I'd run across Councilmember Weeks questioning the hours, and I checked it, the spelling and everything, and the date's wrong.
Sorry, Chief, I didn't mean to.
I will take that up with my staff. I can promise you that.
Hope
was
I
a good
get to be a
catch.
fly on the wall.
Would you like for me to read it again, or just say that it's Friday, not Thursdays?
I was gonna ask why we never had an issue before.
Well, when he
Explain
mentioned it,
it.
I'm thinking, that's never come up before, but I'm slow, so I couldn't figure it out.
And also, just to clarify, it reads 300 block of South Center. Hub is 200 block. Which block is it?
It's a 200 block, but where are you seeing the 300 block? I see it on their application.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's Fridays, Hub. I want to, if this gets approved, we're going to market the thing. I want to market it correctly. So, do we all agree it's Fridays at the Hub,
200.
200 block?
Right.
Yep.
Y'all going
Yeah.
make me lose my mind.
Are we ready for a motion yet?
I am.
I would make a motion that we approve what we just said.
All right, a motion has been made to approve the application with the technical correction that it is Fridays and that it is the 200 block of South Center Street, southbound lanes only. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
All right, motion has been made and seconded to approve, and again, just restating for the record, the application with the technical correction that it is the 200 block of South Center, southbound lanes only adjacent to the Hub on Fridays. Is there a second?
Mayor, it was northbound.
This says southbound.
He said northbound from up.
Right. I said northbound. At least I caught that one, but now it's on paper.
Permission
It's
to
out.
be
hold on a
present
minute.
at the meeting tomorrow morning.
All right.
It says
If
the
it's
northbound
ones
lanes.
adjacent to the Hub, it is the northbound lane.
Right, but this says it's the northbound lane of South Center Street. It's a 200 block of South Center, but it's only the northbound lanes.
That would be adjacent to the Hub.
Right.
That sounds right to
That's in front of the
me,
Hub.
based on past.
Requested event location. Again, I'm not trying to beat a horse or anything else for that matter. I just want to make sure that we're approving exactly what's asked for. This is the 300 block of South Center Street, southbound lane only. Southbound would be on the side of Freedom Field.
Right. If you look at their application, they do specifically, as I'm looking at it right now, in the southbound lanes of
Right.
South Center. That's their application. Resolution, what I read is
Northbound.
northbound
So-
of the 200 block of South Center. So I made the correction there. The
Okay.
resolution is right.
So, but the resolution as presented is correct. The application is what's got errors.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we are approving the we're approving the resolution to be very specific in the motion.
There's no
So,
resolution.
huh?
There's no resolution.
The
What are you talking
recommendation.
about?
Can we just say we approve the sprinkler fund days
Oh, we're spending
as
more
it has
time on-
always been?
We're spending more time on this than we're, okay. All right. We have a, is there, yeah. Yeah, because they're texting Matt as we go in real time. So there was a motion made and seconded, but I want to be very, very clear.
Yeah, there's your sign.
I don't. I'm actually not upset by that. I feel like I should stop talking as well. Or is that my 30-second warning to wrap it up? So we're looking at the 200 block of South Center northbound lane only, Fridays.
Yes, that's my motion.
And is that your second?
And that's my second.
Is there any further debate? Moving to vote very quickly. All in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Thank y'all.
I apologize.
And that's
Thank you, Chief.
not 100% sure that's on you, but we'll get that resolved.
I'm just.
Anyway, moving along. Now, item O, which was a late addition, is in the manila folders. This one, Mr. Livingston, if you don't mind presenting as well, is a agreement to maintain a drainage
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. It's a drainage easement for Alta Foods. It's been run through the various staff, engineering. I think the attorney's been in discussions with them, so they would just like to have that approved so they don't have to wait another couple of weeks to go ahead and get it taken care of. Very routine drainage easement.
All right, to be very specific, is the city encumbered to do anything with that drainage easement, or is it exclusively granting rights to somebody else?
It's
the city's drainage easement, and the Alta Foods is asking to tap into that. And to do that, they have to tap into 2 different spots. And he has offered to maintain that easement and spend the funds to make sure that he taps into the outlets as he's to do.
Perfect.
He's asking permission to tap in, essentially, and he's going to maintain it as a result.
Perfect. So that is a financial liability on the property owner, not on the city.
Correct. The city would not be expending any funds.
Yes.
He would be right.
It's simply granting authorization. All right, so item O as presented, council, is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve the drainage easement proposal as presented. All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motions are made and seconded to approve this agreement to maintain a drainage easement as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Livingston, City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple items real quick here. I think it's worth reiterating that, as our Finance Director said, we'll get a draft of the 22-23 audit, and that's been a work in progress, and then we'll submit that to the LGC after we've had a chance to review it, and we'll meet our deadline of the June 30th. It may actually be a little bit before that date, our own deadline. Of course, it is late, but then after that, we'll officially be on time again. So Finance has already started working with the auditor, Forvis, to set up a lot of the materials that they need to set up to transfer information to get started on this current year 23-24 audit. So there's just been a lot of progress working through the budget and getting the audit done at the same time. It's a tremendous amount of work there, and again, I'd like to say that's hats off to the whole team, really. But Finance has had the brunt of that burden there. And also at the same time, we completed a performance audit, which really found, that they made no written findings after the material sheets, and they closed that out. So I think that's a great accomplishment for the city. I know that it's challenging financial times for Goldsboro, but I think people should be reassured that, lots of people have come from the outside and are looking at our books, and they've seen, that there's nothing wrong. There's no fraudulent activity going on, that we've managed our funds in a fiscally responsible way. We're struggling with things like property tax values, since we haven't had a revaluation in 6 years. And we've been, just like everybody else, we've had inflation issues that we're having to deal with. And it's been a challenge because our costs have been going up, and our equipment has gotten older. So those are the big things that are underlying the budget. And as far as the policy for the street closures, Sergeant Powers has put together a draft for that, a worksheet. So we're ready to take that on, and I think it's going to work well. And that's all I got, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. All right, with that, we will move into mayor and council member comments, as is our habit. As it's the second meeting of the month, we'll begin with Councilmember White, District 6, and work our way over to Councilmember Boyette. Councilmember White, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Be mindful of Memorial Day. For some, it's a happy day. For others, a sad reminder of loved ones lost. A lot of times we say Happy Memorial Day. Sometimes it's not a happy day for those who have lost loved ones. So just be mindful of that. I'd like to welcome the alumni friends to back to the Golden City. I look forward to a wonderful weekend. Please be safe and have a wonderful, safe weekend.
Thank you. Ms. Weeks?
I was also going to mention Memorial Day, and if you haven't had a chance, if you would just ride downtown in Goldsboro, they put out lots of flags today, and it is just a great tribute. Just remember, all gave some, and some gave all. Some gave all. Also, I'm excited about welcoming Dillard alumni this weekend as well and participating in the parade. If you get a chance, join us this weekend for the parade at 10 o'clock Saturday, the 25th, downtown on Center Street.
Thank you. Pro Tem?
Ditto to both of those comments, but I did want to announce that District 4 is getting ready to launch our cardio and conversation sessions at the Patrick Best, also known as the Dillard Track within District 4. It's going to be every Thursday at 6 p.m. So this initiative is in an effort to, 1, get us out the house, 2, get us moving, 3, get us walking and getting some steps in, walking, talking, and building together. So everybody is welcome. Our first conversation and cardio will be May the 30th. So May the 30th is our first Thursday, and we gonna walk until we can't walk no more that day. So all are welcome. So please join us in the district May 30th, 6 p.m. at the Patrick Best, aka Dillard Track. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Hi. Okay, I don't have a lot of comments. I'd just like to echo Councilman White and Councilwoman Weeks' comments about welcoming the Dillard alumni, and everyone have a safe and happy Memorial Day.
Councilor?
I agree with all those comments, so no further comment, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful. All right. Well, as has already been stated, this is a big travel weekend. The world of travel and tourism gets very busy once you get into Memorial Day and getting into summer. So I wish those that are traveling safe travels. Those that are traveling here for Dillard Goldsboro alumni and friends, I can't wait to see you. It's going to be absolutely wonderful, wonderful weekend. Always is. And for those that are interested, when you have a city that gets to host something like that every single year, you also consider it a major travel and tourism win. So there's a lot of reasons that we look forward to being able to host things, in addition to, of course, it paying homage to a major part of the history of our city. So you understand. Safe travels this weekend. Those that are traveling out to go visit family, friends, anything else. Those that are coming into Goldsboro, we can't wait to see you. And we know that we're going to have a wonderful weekend. Also, something that has been a private citizen-led effort thus far is our Union Station. I'm just going to touch on this very briefly. I'm not going to hold everybody up. But the folks that have been putting in the time and energy trying to fundraise and draw attention to connecting rail lines between Wilmington and Raleigh through Goldsboro are really continuing those efforts. They're continuing their lobbying efforts. They're continuing the fundraising efforts. And this past week, they had planned a large Save Union Station Day event that would include some other mayors that would be along the route going from Wilmington up here to Goldsboro, and other elected officials, and just a big cross-section of the community was certainly the goal and the intent. And I just want to say thank you to those who are putting forward the effort to try to make this happen. It's more than what the city could do alone. I mean, the financial investment in that building would just be, through the roof. And as we've already discussed with budget, that's not really in the cards at the moment for the city of Goldsboro. Certainly not city of Goldsboro by itself. But if you combine some state resources, the city, the county, a few other things, and all of a sudden we end up with the plausibility of having passenger rail service connecting Goldsboro, Wilmington, Raleigh, DC, and south, depending on if we're on the Palmetto line or the Piedmont connector line. But either way, would just be a wonderfully positive thing to have around Goldsboro and to have back. Next, this is just a huge thank you to our Parks and Rec team. If y'all haven't looked yet, they've got summer camps going the entire summer. They've got one that goes 7:30 to 5:30. And you look at the cost of it, it's pennies compared to what you would pay if you were actually paying for weekly camps or childcare or something like that. And they are 100% doing it because they know that they can provide an awesome experience for kids of all ages in our community, give them something constructive to do, give them the opportunity to build some friendships, play some sports, and just hang out in a safe, healthy environment. And I so appreciate them answering the call for that. They've done it in the past, but this year is bigger and more than in the past. Because in addition to the full day version that goes from literally right after school stops to right before school opens, they're also running half-day sports camps. I don't know how they're going to do it all, but I'm impressed and I'm grateful that they're willing to put themselves out there. And I so look forward to visiting and being successful and being as supportive as I possibly can. So with that, that concludes my comments. We do have a couple of things to discuss in closed session, but it's just before 8:30, so all of y'all are most likely probably heading somewhere else, and we'll be behind you shortly. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss economic development and potential litigation.
I make a motion that we go into closed session.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and been seconded. Is there a debate on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none, motion passes. We'll go into closed session. Please clear the chambers. Have a wonderful rest of the month. We'll see y'all next month.
He said Ron.
We're back?
He said Ron.
All right. Nothing further to come before the council this evening. Everyone, potentially later this month, if there's an additional special call to be announced, that of course will be announced and noticed. If not, we'll see everyone in June. Good night. Who's that going to?
Thank you.